The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of my rooftop greenhouse, casting long shadows across rows of vibrant lettuce, tomatoes, and herbs growing in perfect vertical columns, 30 stories above Manhattan. My crazy dream had transformed into a thriving ecosystem that was about to reshape the future of food. Ms. Sullivan? My assistant Sarah's voice came through the intercom. The Whole Foods executive team is here for the tour. I smiled, remembering Thanksgiving dinner 5 years ago, when my Uncle Marcus had nearly choked on his wine laughing at my business plan. Urban farming? He'd sneered, while the rest of my family exchanged knowing looks. Growing lettuce on rooftops? Olivia, sweetheart, you have a degree from Stanford. Stop playing farmer and get a real job. Now, standing in my 50,000 square foot rooftop operation, watching robots precisely tend to thousands of plants growing in sophisticated hydroponic systems, I couldn't help but appreciate life's little ironies. Send them up, I replied, straightening my lab coat, the same one I'd worn during my first experiments in my tiny apartment, trying to prove that vertical farming could work in any urban space. The elevator doors opened, and 5 executives in pressed suits stepped out, their expressions shifting from skepticism to awe as they took in the scene before them. Leading the group was James Morrison, Whole Foods head of strategic sourcing. Ms. Sullivan, he breathed, staring at the vertical growing systems that stretched from floor to ceiling. This is remarkable. Thank you, I said, extending my hand. Welcome to Skyline Farms. Shall we begin the tour? As I led them through the facility, I couldn't help but think about how far we'd come. 5 years ago, I was a recently graduated environmental engineer with a crazy idea, transforming urban rooftops into high-tech farms that could feed entire cities. The traditional farming industry called it impossible, my family called it a waste of time, but I saw something they didn't, a solution to multiple problems at once: urban food deserts, carbon emissions from long-distance transportation, water waste in traditional agriculture, and the growing disconnect between people and their food. Our systems use 95% less water than traditional farming, I explained, showing them our proprietary hydroponic technology, and because we're growing vertically, we produce 200 times more food per square foot than conventional farms. But the cost, one executive started. I held up my hand, smiling. Our operating costs are 40% lower than traditional farms, thanks to our AI-driven automation and renewable energy systems. Those solar panels you saw on your way in, they power everything here, including our climate control systems. We moved to the packaging area, where robots were carefully harvesting and packaging fresh produce, from harvest to store shelf in under 3 hours. I said, no cross-country transportation, no cold storage facilities, no waste, just fresh, perfect produce delivered directly to local stores. James Morrison nodded slowly, taking notes on his tablet. And you say you can replicate this system? We already have, I replied, pulling up our monitoring dashboard on a nearby screen. 20 locations across New York City, producing enough food to feed 2 million people. We're expanding to Chicago, Los Angeles, and Miami next month. I didn't mention that those expansions were already operational, or that we had contracts pending with major property developers in 30 more cities. Let Whole Foods think they were getting in early. The quality is impressive, another executive noted, examining a perfectly formed head of lettuce. But can you maintain this level of consistency at scale? I tried not to smile too broadly. They were asking exactly the questions I'd prepared for, walking right into the presentation I'd spent years perfecting. Follow me, I said, leading them to our control room. Wall-to-wall screens displayed real-time data from every aspect of our operation: temperature, humidity, nutrient levels, growth rates, and harvest predictions. Our AI system monitors and adjusts every variable 24/7, I explained. Each plant gets exactly what it needs, when it needs it. We can predict our harvest quantities 6 weeks out with 99.8% accuracy. The executives exchanged glances. This was beyond what they'd expected. And the variety? James asked. We've seen the lettuce and tomatoes, but what else can you grow? I tapped my tablet, bringing up our product catalog. Currently, we produce 64 varieties of leafy greens, 12 types of tomatoes, 8 varieties of peppers, and an assortment of herbs and microgreens. We're also developing strawberries and other fruits. Ms. Sullivan, James said slowly, I think we should discuss distribution opportunities. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared at the door. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have an urgent call from the governor's office regarding the food security initiative. Perfect timing. Sarah and I had practiced this interruption, knowing it would add just the right pressure to the negotiation. "Please excuse me for a moment," I said to the executives. "Sarah will show you our testing lab while I take this call." As I stepped away, I heard one executive whisper to another, "If we don't move on this now, Amazon will beat us to it." In my office, I took a moment to breathe, looking out over the Manhattan skyline. Below, millions of people were going about their days, not yet knowing that their relationship with food was about to change forever. My phone buzzed, a text from Uncle Marcus. "Saw your name in the Wall Street Journal, urban farming revolutionary. Maybe I was wrong about the rooftop lettuce." I set the phone down without replying. There would be time for family reconciliations later. Right now, I had a revolution to launch. The journey here hadn't been easy. After graduating, I'd spent 2 years working in my apartment, developing the initial technology. Every spare dollar went into research and prototypes. My parents thought I was having a quarter-life crisis. "Engineering jobs at Google don't wait forever," my mother would say during our weekly calls. "Your cousin Michael just got promoted to project manager." But I couldn't let go of the vision. I'd seen the problems in our food system firsthand during my college research: the waste, the inefficiency, the environmental impact. Someone had to find a better way. The breakthrough came in my 3rd year, when I developed a new hydroponic system that could increase yield density by 300%. That caught the attention of a small venture capital firm specializing in agricultural technology. "This isn't just innovative," my first investor had said, examining the prototype. "This is revolutionary." With that initial funding, I leased our first rooftop space, a small greenhouse on top of an old warehouse in Brooklyn. The locals thought I was crazy, until they tasted the first harvest. Word spread quickly. Local restaurants started asking for our produce, then high-end grocers, then school districts looking for fresh, local options for their cafeterias. By year 2, we had 5 locations and a waiting list of property owners wanting to convert their rooftops into farms. The technology was working better than I'd ever imagined, and the data we were collecting was invaluable. But it wasn't until the COVID pandemic that everything really accelerated. When traditional supply chains broke down, our local production model proved its worth. We never missed a delivery, never had a shortage. That's when the major players started paying attention. Now, standing in my office 30 stories above Manhattan, I was about to sign a deal that would take Skyline Farms national. Sarah knocked gently. "They're ready for you in the conference room. Legal has reviewed the preliminary agreement." I nodded, straightening my lab coat. "Let's not keep them waiting." Walking back to the conference room, I passed the wall where we displayed our first harvest photos. Small, imperfect vegetables grown in makeshift systems held together with zip ties and hope. Below them was our company motto: "The future of food grows up." The Whole Foods executives stood as I entered, their body language eager now, almost nervous. They knew they weren't the only ones interested in what we'd built. "Ms. Sullivan," James began, "we'd like to discuss a nationwide partnership. Exclusive distribution rights for Skyline Farms produce in all Whole Foods locations." I sat down, opened my laptop, and pulled up a document. "Actually, I have a different proposal, one that I think better aligns with our vision for the future of urban agriculture." For the next hour, I laid out our plan, not just for distribution, but for a complete reimagining of how cities produce and consume food. By the time I finished, they weren't just interested, they were true believers. As they left, James turned back. "You know, when I first heard about rooftop farming, I thought it was a gimmick. I've never been happier to be wrong." I smiled, remembering all the doubters, all the dismissive comments, all the well-meaning advice to get a real job. "That's the thing about the future," I replied. "Sometimes you have to grow it yourself." 6 months after the Whole Foods meeting, I stood in our newest facility in Chicago, watching as our automated systems installed rows of vertical growing tubes in what used to be an abandoned warehouse. The space would soon produce enough food to feed 500,000 people year-round. My phone buzzed, a news alert from Bloomberg: "Skyline Farms revolutionizes urban agriculture, stock soars 300% after IPO." Below it was a message from Uncle Marcus: "Just saw the market news. $8, $4 billion valuation? We need to talk." I smiled, remembering his words at last year's Christmas dinner. "Urban farming is a cute hobby, Olivia, but real businesses make real money." Sarah appeared at my side, tablet in hand. "The Singapore development team is ready for your call, and the White House confirmed tomorrow's meeting about the National Food Security Initiative." Before I could respond, another message lit up my phone, this one from my mother: "Saw you on the cover of Forbes, the woman feeding cities. Your father and I, we were wrong." Can we have dinner soon? The journey from crazy dreamer to agricultural revolutionary had been a whirlwind, especially these last 6 months. After the Whole Foods partnership, everything accelerated, but it wasn't just about business growth, we were changing how cities thought about food. Ms. Sullivan? A voice called from behind me. I turned to find Dr. Amelia Parker, our head of research and development, practically bouncing with excitement. You need to see this. She led me to our experimental section, where we tested new growing techniques and crop varieties. Remember that strawberry variant we'd been working on, the one designed for vertical systems? She pointed to a row of plants heavy with fruit. First harvest data just came in. Yield is 400% higher than traditional farming, with 80% less water usage. And the taste. She handed me a perfectly ripe strawberry. I bit into it, and the flavor exploded across my tongue. Sweet, complex, better than any strawberry I'd ever tasted. This changes everything, I said, already thinking of the implications. There's more, Amelia continued. The genetic markers we identified, they're applicable to other fruits. We could potentially develop vertical optimized versions of everything from blueberries to dwarf apple trees. This was exactly what we'd been working toward, not just growing existing crops more efficiently, but developing entirely new varieties specifically designed for urban vertical farming. My phone buzzed again. A message from James at Whole Foods. Competitors are launching copycat operations. We need to talk strategy. Of course they were. Success breeds imitation. But what our competitors didn't understand was that Skyline Farms wasn't just about the technology, it was about a complete reimagining of our relationship with food. Schedule a board meeting for tomorrow, I told Sarah, and set up a press conference for the strawberry announcement. It's time to show the world what's next. That evening, as the sun set over Chicago's skyline, I took a video call in our rooftop conference room. On the screen were agricultural ministers from 12 different countries, all eager to discuss implementing our systems in their major cities. The potential impact on food security is unprecedented, the French minister was saying, but the costs. I shared my screen, showing them our latest data. Initial setup costs are offset within 18 months. After that, production costs are 60% lower than traditional farming, and that's before factoring in environmental benefits and reduced transportation needs. As I walked them through the numbers, I thought about all the late nights spent refining these systems, all the failed experiments, all the moments of doubt, but every setback had taught us something valuable. The breakthrough that really changed everything came from an unexpected place. We'd been struggling with energy efficiency in our climate control systems when I remembered something from my Stanford days, a paper about heat distribution in termite mounds. That led to a complete redesign of our airflow systems, cutting energy usage by 40% overnight. Nature, it turned out, had already solved many of our problems, we just had to pay attention. After the call, I walked through our experimental section, checking on the new varieties under development. Besides the strawberries, we were working on compact citrus trees, vertical grape systems, and even a new type of wheat designed for indoor cultivation. Sarah appeared with my evening briefing. The Dubai project is ahead of schedule. Their first facility will be operational next month, and the Tokyo team just sent updated designs for the subway station installations. I nodded, scanning through the reports. We were no longer just putting farms on rooftops, we were integrating them into the very fabric of urban architecture. New buildings were being designed with our systems built in, and old structures were being retrofitted to include growing spaces. A notification popped up on my tablet. My sister Madeline had just tagged me in a social media post. It was a photo of produce from her local grocery store, showing my name on the packaging. Her caption read, "Remember when we thought that Olivia Sullivan was crazy? Now she's feeding the world. Proud doesn't begin to cover it. Hashtag Skyline Farms, hashtag Proud Sister." It was nice, but it also stirred up complicated feelings. Where was this support when I was maxing out credit cards to fund my research? Where was the pride when I was sleeping on a cot in my first greenhouse, manually adjusting temperature controls every 2 hours? My phone rang, Uncle Marcus again. This time, I decided to answer. "Olivia," he started, his voice unusually humble, "I owe you an apology." "Just one?" I couldn't help asking. He chuckled nervously. "Fair enough. Listen, I was wrong, not just about the business, but about everything. What you've built, it's extraordinary." "Thank you," I said simply. "Was there something specific you wanted to discuss?" "Yes, actually, the investment firm I work for. We're interested in your next funding round, whatever terms you want to name." I smiled. thinking of all the times he'd lectured me about real investing versus hobby projects. "I appreciate the offer," I said, "but our next round is already oversubscribed. Maybe check back in a few years?" After hanging up, I walked to the edge of the rooftop garden. The city stretched out below me, lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. Somewhere down there, people were sitting down to dinners made with food we'd grown right here in their city. Tomorrow, I would announce our new developments, the breakthrough with the strawberries, the international expansion, the integration of our systems into public transportation hubs. The world was finally ready for the future we'd been building. Sarah appeared one last time. Final numbers for today: 8 million meals delivered, 0 transportation emissions, 97% reduction in water usage compared to traditional farming. I nodded, thinking of how far we'd come from that first tiny greenhouse. "Send me the latest data on the school program too. I want to update the board on how many students are learning about urban agriculture." Because that was the real revolution, not just changing how we grow food, but changing how people think about it. Every school we partnered with, every community garden we supported, every person who tasted a perfectly ripe tomato grown in their own neighborhood was part of this transformation. The next morning, I arrived early at our Chicago facility. The sunrise painted the greenhouse glass in shades of golden pink, creating halos around the thousands of plants growing in perfect vertical rows. As I prepared for the board meeting, I pulled up our company's mission statement, the same one I'd written in my apartment 5 years ago: "Growing Tomorrow's Cities, Today." Below it, I'd recently added a new line, "Because sometimes the craziest dreams are the ones that change the world." My phone buzzed with another news alert: Urban Farming Revolution, How Skyline Farms is Transforming Cities into Self-Sustaining Food Systems. I smiled, thinking of all the people who said it couldn't be done, the experts who claimed vertical farming would never scale, the investors who said the technology was too expensive, the family members who thought I was throwing my life away. Now our systems were feeding millions, our technology was being adopted globally, and we were just getting started. The future of food wasn't in massive rural farms, it was in cities, growing up instead of out, bringing people closer to their food than ever before. Sarah knocked on my door. "They're ready for you in the boardroom, and your parents are in the lobby. They don't have an appointment, but..." I took a deep breath. "Send them up. It's time they saw what their crazy daughter built." Because success isn't just about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. And sometimes the best revenge isn't in showing people they were wrong, but in showing them a future they couldn't even imagine. If you've ever had a dream that others dismissed, ever stood alone believing in something bigger than yourself, or ever felt the weight of doubt pushing against your vision, remember this: sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that change the world. So dream big, grow bigger, and never let anyone's limitations become your reality. Because the future belongs to those who dare to grow it themselves. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories about turning impossible dreams into world-changing realities. The revolution isn't just about farming, it's about believing in the power of one person to change everything. Remember, every forest started with a single seed. What will you grow?
Waking up in the intensive care unit, I could just hear my wife Grace's voice on the phone. Bits of her conversation drifted to me, and I suddenly realized she was talking about my will. Panic mixed with disbelief as I pretended to be dead, eager to fully understand the betrayal happening right next to me. The moment my eyes fluttered open, a harsh white glare assaulted my vision. Where am I? Why do I feel so weak and powerless? I muttered under my breath. The faint squeaking of sensors and the hum of machinery around me confirmed my fears. I was in a hospital. But how did I end up here? What had happened to me? As I struggled to piece together my thoughts, a sharp pain pierced through my consciousness, forcing a groan from my lips. An intense thirst clawed at my throat, yet there was no one to offer me water, no soothing presence to ease my discomfort. Alone and confused, I lay there, surrounded by medical equipment I had never seen before. The 4 drips and sensors attached to me felt alien, as if I was more machine than man. My wife's voice, so familiar yet so distant, suddenly filled the room. My heart raced as I strained to listen, hoping for words of concern, but instead, I caught snippets of a conversation that chilled me to the bone. "Dr. Merritt, how is my husband? Will he remain in this state long? Perhaps we should consider more radical measures." Grace's voice, tinged with a false sweetness, did not sit right with me. The doctor's reply was cautious yet stern. Don't anger God. Hope for the best. Your husband's chances are slim, but you mustn't give up. And try to spend less time near him. We wouldn't want any accidental infections. Grace's syrupy tone returned as she acknowledged the doctor's advice. Of course, I understand. Thank you. The sound of her footsteps receding and the door closing marked her departure, but not before a cold exchange that left me reeling. The silence that followed was broken by the unexpected ring of a phone. It jolted me, the ringtone echoing strangely in the sterile room. With great effort, I strained to eavesdrop, despite my usual disdain for such acts. After all, under normal circumstances, I, James Williams, a successful restaurant owner, would never stoop so low. But confined to this hospital bed, I had no choice but to listen. Hello, darling. Is that you? Your number seemed unfamiliar. A will? Yes, I've written it. Yes, everything as I wanted. Grace spoke into the phone, her words slicing through the air with precision. The conversation that followed revealed her true intentions. She spoke of managing my restaurant, of inheriting everything once I was no longer there. As she continued, my heart pounded with a mix of fury and despair. How could she speak so callously about my condition, about my life, as if I were already gone? The term vegetable, used so casually, so cruelly, left me breathless. Lying there, unable to move or speak, I pondered over the events that led me to this grim reality. How had I ended up here? Who had saved me from the fiery car crash that I vaguely remembered? The answers seemed just out of reach, obscured by pain and betrayal. As these thoughts swirled in my mind, memories of earlier, happier times came to me. I remembered waking up early, enjoying the quiet of dawn while the city slept, the comforting routine of making breakfast, the crisp air on my terrace. Life had been simple, predictable, and fulfilling with my morning routines and my commitment to a healthy lifestyle as a vegetarian, which I never imposed on Grace. Yet here I was, grappling with a harsh new reality. As I lay there, the sound of Grace ending her call with "I love you, goodbye for now." I was left to ponder the depth of her deceit and the fragility of trust. The realization of her betrayal, confirmed by her own words, was a bitter pill to swallow, harder still to digest than any physical ailment could ever be. As I stood outside my restaurant, skillfully maneuvering a shovel to clear the snow off the steps, onlookers seemed intrigued by the sight of a well-dressed businessman handling such a mundane task. Henry, the janitor, watched me with a respectful nod. "You're quite skilled at this, James. Where did you pick up such extensive practice?" I flashed a smile, memories of my youth flooding back. In the village, of course, at my grandfather's place on the distant outskirts. He had quite a lot of land there. I'm not much into hunting, but picking mushrooms, berries, or fishing. Always up for that. So there was a lot of snow there in the winter. You'd wake up, and it's dark in the hut, all windows covered in snow. You take a shovel and go ahead. Henry looked at me with undisguised sympathy. He knew I was a good man, someone who never offended him with word or deed, and sometimes even stood up for him, especially in front of the administrator who enjoyed bullying those weaker than him. Just then, the wind picked up, and Andrew, the restaurant administrator, shouted over the gusts, "Mr. Williams, what are you doing? The wind is so strong, and you're thinking of clearing snow? You'll catch a cold for sure. Where would we be without you then?" I turned to face Andrew, catching the deceitful and flattering tone in his voice. "Oh, come on, Andrew, it's nothing. I'm not a kid after all. Tell me, how are things at the restaurant? The suppliers didn't let us down, did they? And are all the staff at work?" At the mention of the staff, Andrew grimaced as if from a toothache. "Yes, everything's in place, except for that dishwasher. What's her name, Emma? No matter how much you scold her, she never comes to work on time." I handed the shovel back to Henry and looked disapprovingly at Andrew. "You very well know that Emma has 4 children, whom by the way she raises on her own. And I've asked you not to call her a dishwasher. Emma is a kitchen worker or a kitchen staff member. Learn to respect your subordinates. Without that, you can't build a proper workflow." The sharpness of my remark made Andrew shiver, and he glanced sneakily at Henry, who was grinning ear to ear. Ah! He heard it loud and clear. Look at him, grinning shamelessly. Well, no matter, we'll sort it out. Let's just get rid of the boss first and then tighten the screws on everyone else. At that moment, Emma Fisher appeared from around the corner, hurrying as fast as she could to get to work, walking straight through the snow. Oh, here comes Emma. So, what's the excuse this time? Did the bus break down? Or did you come up with something more elaborate? Andrew began, but stopped under my piercing gaze. Sorry, Mr. Brown. The bus got turned around on the road. Had to find alternatives. Emma replied apologetically, her nose running. All right, off you go and make sure everything is in order. Clean the dishes thoroughly, so they squeak when I touch them. Andrew concluded with a stern look. Emma nodded and hurried towards the entrance door. At that moment, she awkwardly stumbled on a step, causing the sole of her boot to skid on the surface. I was the first to react, supporting Emma at the most dangerous moment. Oh, thank you. I'm sorry for being so clumsy. She began to apologize. Don't apologize, Emma. It's not your fault. But perhaps Andrew should finally get to work and sprinkle some salt on the pathways, I remarked, emphasizing the last word. After that, I took Emma's hand to help her ascend the slippery steps. Despite not wearing gloves, her palm felt very warm to the businessman. But then, something very strange happened. Emma suddenly let out a loud gasp and jerked her tiny hand away. What's wrong? Are you hurt? I asked with concern. Emma guiltily lowered her gaze, clutching her hand into a fist. She looked frightened, not like herself at all. I'm sorry, please. It's not your fault at all. It must have been my imagination. Sorry again? Emma forced out, fear freezing in her eyes, a fear I could feel in my skin. But what was it about? What did I do wrong? Did I squeeze her hand too hard? No, it didn't seem like it. Shaking my head in bewilderment, I hurried after Emma. I caught up with her in the hall where I quietly called out to avoid attracting the attention of others. Emma, what happened? Why did you react so strangely? She froze and looked at me with a strange pity. I'm sorry. It's all because of my visions. Visions? I exclaimed in confusion. Emma paled. Well, the ones that come true, you know, like premonitions, but real. They started back in school when I got a concussion during a PE class. We were climbing a rope and I fell. The height wasn't much, but that's when it all began. I frowned. And what did you, may I ask, see in these visions? Tears suddenly filled Emma's eyes. It's a car accident. What color is your car? Dark green. When I touched your hand, I immediately understood that car will be involved in a terrible accident. But it won't be your fault. It will be someone very close to you. I saw it the moment I touched your hand. It struck me like lightning. I looked at my colleague with irony. I didn't believe in any prophecies, of course. In my understanding, it was sheer nonsense, and all these fortune-tellers and seers were just charlatans. There was that one madam who predicted a long and thorny path to success for me back in my student years. And so what? The path did await, of course, but it required a great deal of hard work, and those predictions had nothing to do with it. Emma looked at her boss with concern, realizing he didn't believe a word she said. Excuse me, Mr. Williams, but I heard you refrain from driving for the near future, she said. I just smiled. Oh, don't worry, Emma. I've been driving for over 10 years and I've had no issues with it. Besides, I never exceed the speed limit, so there's no need for unnecessary concern. An accident is definitely not in my cards. Emma nodded in agreement, looking at me as if I were already doomed. All right then, get back to work and don't dwell on the negatives. By the way, how are your little ones? If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'll help however I can, I said as I headed to my office. Thank you, everything's fine, Mr. Williams. I just need your permission for something, Emma cautiously asked. Permission, of course. Go ahead. What do you need? I replied. The dishwasher hesitated for a moment as if gathering her strength, then said, I want to ask for your permission to take home the dishes that customers rejected. Just 1 or 2. I'll pay for everything. Can it be deducted from my salary? I smiled. Yes, of course. What's the matter? And no payment is necessary. They're going to be disposed of anyway. Besides, it seems both you and the kids will benefit. Take as many as you want. Joyful sparks danced in her eyes. This was real luck. Meanwhile, I went about my usual business, talking on the phone with the restaurant manager, approving menus, and preparing for the inspection, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Yet, from time to time, I remembered Emma's words, which had struck a chord with me. Can you believe it? A kitchen worker with fortune-telling abilities. That's a first for me. But soon, thoughts of a possible road accident faded away, making room for meetings with new suppliers, tasting new dishes, and discussing current restaurant matters with the administrator, maintaining an atmosphere of trust and cooperation. I gently resolved disputes using the stick far less often than the carrot. Time passed unnoticed, crossing the 3-hour mark. The fury of the storm still raged, but its morning impact had diminished. The city's utilities surprisingly quickly took control of the situation and cleared most of the vital roads. Although there was still an hour and a half left in the workday, I decided to leave early today. An interesting plan had matured in my mind regarding how I could fill this February evening with an aura of love and romance. I decided to pampose my spouse with a gorgeous bouquet of roses, a bottle of wine, and something delicious from my own restaurant kitchen. While the last 2 items didn't take him much time, searching for flowers in the snow-covered city turned into a real quest. To my immense dismay, most of the flower pavilions were closed. Most likely, the owners of the stalls had decided that there would be hardly anyone interested in buying flowers on such a day. And just when I was almost losing hope, I noticed that one of the shops at the street corner was still open. With a joyous heart, I parked my car by the roadside and stepped inside. The pavilion smelled pleasantly of roses, tulips, and freshly imported. After all, it was the end of February, which meant Women's Day was just around the corner, leaving barely 2 weeks for preparations. Inside the flower shop, a friendly salesperson quickly helped me assemble the bouquet I needed. With my heart humming in anticipation of the romantic evening ahead, I made my way home, eager to surprise Grace, who seldom prepared dinner knowing I often ate at the restaurant. I brought with me fruit and vegetable platters, champagne, and a couple of exquisite dishes from Chef Frank, which he prepared exceptionally well. Arriving home, I decided against ringing the doorbell and instead used my key to enter. As I stepped into the hallway, soft music wafted from the bedroom. Assuming Grace was indulging in her series again, I headed to the kitchen with my bags. Placing the bouquet in the living room to surprise her later, I walked into the bedroom with a smile, only for my heart to sink as the bouquet slipped from my grasp, roses shedding petals in my sudden dismay. Grace wasn't there. The room was empty except for the TV blaring in the background. Where could she have gone, especially in such a snowstorm? Concern gnawed at me. She was not confident behind the wheel. A frantic thought struck me. I needed to check if the car was still in the garage. Just as I turned to leave the bedroom, an urgent news broadcast caught my attention. A foreign car had skidded off the city bridge, driven by an inexperienced driver. My heart raced. Could it be Grace? I had even transferred money to her card earlier for a new dress. Without a second thought, I dashed to my car and sped toward the bridge. The roads were treacherous, and my car slid dangerously on turns, but I managed to keep control, relying on my years of driving experience. Grace, however, had only recently started driving. Why had I encouraged her to drive today of all days? With the bridge just 2 miles away, my car slid once more. I slammed on the brakes, but they failed inexplicably. Faced with a life-threatening decision, swerve and potentially roll the car or crash head-on into another parked vehicle, I chose to swerve. My car rolled several times before crashing into a tree. The last thing I remember was the sharp smell of gasoline, hinting at the imminent danger of a fire. Now, here I lay in the hospital, surrounded by the constant beeping of life support machines, haunted by the realization that the girl from the news wasn't Grace but someone else. My thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and betrayal. Grace had been seeing someone else all this time, someone she valued more than anything. And then there was the matter of the will. She had convinced me to draft it just a few months ago. At the time, It seemed insignificant, but now, every detail took on a sinister hue. As these thoughts tormented me, I made a decision to feign being in a coma, keeping my eyes tightly shut whenever Grace was near. I could feel her gaze on me, cold and calculating, her fingers itching to end my life by simply pressing a few buttons on the machines that kept me alive. The danger felt palpable, as if death were breathing down my neck. Just then, footsteps echoed in the corridor, causing Grace to retreat quickly. Dr. Merritt entered the room shortly after, discussing my case with a nurse. "It's just mind-boggling. She's ready to bury him alive, you know. Why marry such vipers?" he commented. Dr. Merritt approached my bed, noting aloud that some sensors seemed to be disabled. "Probably a malfunction. We'll need a specialist to check this, though it usually takes time for a patient to come out of a coma. I'm sure he'll survive against all odds. A miracle in such cases is quite possible," he said optimistically. The nurse, Erica, stayed behind to check the sensors. As she fiddled with them, I whispered quietly for water. Startled, she jumped slightly, then quickly regained her composure. "So, you've woken up? Why didn't you signal?" she asked. Gathering what little strength I had left, I pleaded, "Please don't tell anyone I've regained consciousness. Let it be our secret, at least for today." Although puzzled by my request, considering my wife's strange behavior, Erica agreed to keep my secret. "All right, I'll do everything I can, but you still can't drink. The most I can do is moisten your lips," she whispered, touching a wet piece of cotton to my lips. The relief, though minimal, was immensely comforting. As Erica set up and drip to nourish my body, tears of gratitude welled up in my eyes. Her kindness in such a dire situation reinforced my resolve. They won't get my will and inheritance. I will recover and ensure Grace doesn't get a penny in the divorce, I thought determinedly, swallowing the bitter lump in my throat. With that, I drifted into a restless sleep, while Erica reported back to Dr. Merritt, who silently acknowledged her actions, choosing to keep my progress a secret from Grace. If I were in her shoes, I'd be praying for my husband's recovery, but this witch only thinks about her inheritance, he remarked, thankful for Erica's vigilance. Meanwhile, Grace had taken control of the restaurant, imposing her will with a fiery determination that left everyone under her gaze feeling small and insignificant. Her aggressive approach was a stark contrast to my more compassionate style, and it wasn't long before she began making drastic changes, including planning to install hidden surveillance cameras to monitor everyone's every move. Unaware of my gradual recovery, she continued her tyrannical rule, believing she had the upper hand. But I was determined to fight back, for my own sake and for the good of those who depended on me. She only has 2 of her own, and 2 more from her husband's first marriage, the administrator added obligingly. They're all mine, and as for what my husband left, let it remain on his conscience. He's in prison now, caught stealing. He thought the kids would help him reduce his sentence, but I managed to get his rights reversed, Emma muttered through tears. But Grace remained unmoved. Honestly, what Grace needed right now was a scapegoat to show her power to everyone else. And Emma, who had the misfortune of being caught in the crossfire, became just that. So how about you, Fisher? Well, you're fired. You can go wherever you want, Grace concluded, gesturing towards the door. Despair froze in my eyes. But how could this be? Could she really dismiss me like some unwanted stray dog? The administrator didn't want to stay on the sidelines and contributed his 2 cents to the matter. Oh, and I almost forgot, Fisher, don't count on your salary. You understand, right? The money will go towards compensating the damages. The news was a devastating blow. Realizing that I had been deceived by everyone who could, I went outside and exposed my heated cheeks to the freezing wind. Seeing this, Henry couldn't help himself and approached. Shoo, dear, don't cry. Don't torment yourself, sunshine. You know Andrew is in favor right now. That's why he's doing whatever he pleases. And when Mr. Williams recovers, his reign will come to an end. And so that you don't end up completely without money, I'll allocate some from my pension for you. You can repay it whenever you can, no rush, said the janitor, embracing me by the shoulders. Thank you, Henry, for your support and protection. You see, I was counting so much on this money, and then this happened. We're struggling with the kids in a rented apartment, and the landlady keeps raising the rent, saying, "You receive child benefits so you won't become poor?" I replied, choking back tears. The elderly man shook his head, feeling sorry for me, to say the least. Such a good colleague, calm, diligent, never speaks ill of anyone. I wash dishes up to my elbows in hot water, and that's it. And this Andrew, the administrator, is a first-rate troublemaker. Henry remembered him from his work at the high school, where he had been a craft teacher for over 40 years. So this Andrew, when he was a student, behaved extremely insolently, humiliating those who were poorer than him or physically weaker. Henry once tried to shame Andrew, but it was all in vain, and then one dark night, the workshops for practicing crafts caught fire. Many blamed Henry then, saying he didn't put out his cigarette properly, but he had never smoked in his life and always observed fire safety precautions. The mystery was unraveled with Andrew, who in fact had committed arson with a group of teenage friends. Henry couldn't prove anything at the time and was subsequently fired from the school with the corresponding note in his employment record. Overall, the dismissal didn't bother the crafts teacher too much, as he was formerly retired by then and had no bread left on his plate for sure. After 17 years had passed since the incident, by the twist of fate, Andrew and the elderly janitor crossed paths again, though in quite different capacities. Now, of course, Andrew pretended not to recognize his former teacher, but Henry Brooks was no fool and had seen far too much in life to take Andrew at his word. However, James appealed to him, honest, kind, fair, just the kind of leader he should be. Clutching the money given by Henry, I slowly made my way towards the bus stop to catch my needed bus on time. Memories of the recent snowstorm loomed on both sides of the road with dirty gray mounds of snow that had fallen several weeks ago. Lost in my somber thoughts, I trudged along the street when suddenly I heard a muffled murmuring. It turned out that I hadn't managed to distance myself from the restaurant by a decent margin, and thus I quickly turned around, thinking Henry was following me to say something, but there was no one behind me. A fairly brisk frost lingered, nipping at my nose and rosy cheeks. The mysterious sound repeated, and I realized it was coming from the nearest snowdrift. Understanding that someone clearly needed help, I cautiously approached and froze in shock. There lay a man with a bloody head, groaning softly and unconscious on the dirty gray snow. My first thought was that the stranger had simply had too much to drink and had fallen, hitting his head, but when I leaned over the young man, I immediately realized he was as sober as a judge. Without a second thought, I lifted the unfortunate man under his armpits and tried to get him on his feet. He was gradually regaining consciousness, indicating that the initial shock from the injury was wearing off. Damn! How could this happen? Bastards! Don't touch Jack! The man muttered deliriously. Meanwhile, I stooped under the weight of the stranger's body, led him to Henry's shed, thinking that the injured man was simply delirious. I tried to ignore his muttering and persevered towards our destination. The man I had rescued was definitely a vagabond and could have frozen to death on the streets in such bitter cold. Seeing my flushed face, Henry understood everything without words. Taking the man from the other side, he, with my help, quickly laid him on the cot which had once been a folding sofa. Well, that's better now. Let's treat the wound on his head. He'll probably recover soon, Henry sighed in relief, taking out bandages, cotton, and antiseptic from the first aid kit. Can you manage? Shouldn't we call an ambulance? I asked anxiously, but the janitor just shook his head. No, dear, there's no need. Why distract people from more important work? I wanted to be a doctor in my youth, but I failed the entrance exams, then spent a year and a half in medical school, decided to become a nurse, but even there, luck wasn't on my side, so I had to become a laborer. But I know how to provide first aid, so don't worry. The lad is tough, street smart. He'll pull through, no doubt. My face immediately lit up with a sweet smile as the wounded man opened his eyes and began to turn his head from side to side, trying to understand where he found himself. Easy there, buddy, easy. Sudden movements aren't recommended for you right now. Just lie down and regain your senses. Do you at least remember your name? Henry cautiously asked. The guy forced a smile. Of course I do. Connor, that's my name. Sawyer, the last name, got beaten up because of a dog. These rich kids wanted some fun with a victim, and they chose the dog, Jack. He's a street dog, you know. He settled near the meat pavilion, not afraid of people. So when I saw that villainy, I immediately rushed to help. I took down 2 on the snow, but the third one, the jerk, hit me on the head with something. Henry nodded sympathetically. Yeah, that kind of thing happens. Don't worry. Stay here as long as you need. I have firewood and a little stove here. You'll be as comfortable as can be. Connor gratefully looked at me, who hadn't passed by, and helped him in his difficult moment. Sneaking a glance at my watch, I sighed sadly. Well, looks like I'll have to take a taxi now. There go my savings. I've already missed the bus. Connor sniffled with a guilty look and turned away to the wall. Then, feeling it was because of him, the vagabond said, Forgive me, for God's sake. I didn't mean for it to turn out this way. I've been having quite the adventures lately. 3 weeks ago, I pulled a rich guy out of a burning car. Maybe you heard about it? It was quite a loud incident. I paled and involuntarily looked at my palm, remembering what happened during the revelation regarding Mr. Williams' future. We heard, Connor. That was the restaurant owner, well, the one Henry and I used to work for. Henry replied for both of us. We don't work there anymore, at least I don't. I corrected him immediately. The guy shook his head sadly and winced from the pain. His neck was stiff, and any slightly sharp movement caused a spasm. Easy, my friend. Don't get agitated. And for saving our friend here, you deserve a special thank you. James was a very good person and probably still is. The janitor corrected himself. I just happened to be there. It's not really my territory, you see. Us vagabonds, we divide everything by districts, by yards. Step onto someone else's turf, and you'll quickly get your ribs cracked. But there, I saw it. An accident and a pillar of smoke rising from it. People were running around, wailing, but no one was rushing to save the man. The gas tank could have exploded at any moment. The vagabond began his story. Henry looked at his interlocutor with undisguised respect. Deep down, he had long concluded that Connor was a good man. Otherwise, would he have rushed to the defense of a stray dog? Unlikely. Connor took a deep breath and, touching the wound on his temple with his fingers, continued. As soon as I saw that someone could burn alive, I ran straight to the car. I smashed the glass with a cobblestone and started pulling him out of the car. And all around, there was noise, chaos, people shouting that the fuel tank would soon explode. It was all true, but you can't just leave the driver. Anyway, I made it, dragged him about 10 meters away, and then it went off. You, my friend, are a true hero, to just throw yourself into the fire for our James, Henry said sorrowfully. I looked warmly at the rescued boy and caught myself thinking that all this seemed somehow not accidental. Connor saved James. I saved Connor. After that, it was hard to believe in coincidences. Since I couldn't delay any longer, I called a taxi and went home, where 4 hungry children were waiting for me. Nathan, Anna, Peter, and Emily. At the same time, lying in the hospital bed, I gradually came back to my senses. Although my strength was minimal and I could barely manage to hold a spoon or fork, Erica and Dr. Merritt had skillfully kept Grace in the dark for 5 days. She believed I was still in a coma and was planning to disconnect me from the life support to claim her inheritance. On the 5th day, I called Erica over and asked for her help with a daring plan. I need to leave for a short while. Do you understand? I asked the nurse. Erica looked at me incredulously. Less than a week ago, I had emerged from a coma, and now here I was, plotting an escape. James, excuse me, but I won't take such responsibility. What if something happens to you? What should I do then? Stand trial? Erica objected. Desperation flickered in my eyes. Well, help me be a human, will you? I'll sign any document you want about understanding the consequences and relieving the clinic of all responsibility. I pleaded. Erica hesitated, her face a portrait of conflict, yet understanding the urgency, especially given Grace's ruthlessness. Fine, I agree, but only if we go together, okay? It'll be calmer for both of us. Just in the evening, a couple of hours before lights out, she proposed, and I nodded in agreement. Okay, Erica, but let's keep this between us. Not even Dr. Merritt should know so that no one else knows. I insisted with a hopeful look. Erica nodded and began preparing for our covert departure. She gathered necessary medicines and even borrowed a walking stick from the clinic. Meanwhile, I lay back, gathering strength and contemplating the past events, my thoughts inevitably turning to Emma. God, she was right all along, I thought, tears welling up as I realized the weight of my previous skepticism. Later that evening, Erica returned with a set of clothes. Here, get dressed. These are my ex-husband's things. He never bothered to take them. I think they'll fit you, she said with a smile. I dressed as swiftly as my body allowed, staggering under the weight of my injuries. Every few steps required a pause as I caught my breath, but Erica was there, understanding and patient, supporting me every step of the way. She had even arranged for a private driver who drove cautiously and asked no questions. Arriving at my home, anxiety surged within me. The familiar drumbeat of my heartbeat echoed in my ears as I approached the front door, keys in hand. Inserting the key into the lock, I found it didn't fit. Grace had changed the locks. She adapted to the new reality quickly. I must say, I muttered, resigning myself to ring the doorbell instead. The door opened shortly after, revealing not Grace, but her lover, clad in my own bathrobe, a gift from my late mother. The sight triggered a mixture of shock and anger in me. Who's there, darling? Not the utilities again, I hope. I've paid everything in advance for a month, so we could relax at the resort. Grace's voice floated from behind the stranger. Pale and clenching my fists in pain, I confronted the scene before me. Grace, realizing her gambit had failed, fell to her knees. James, please forgive me. It's not what you think. I swear. I thought you had only a few days left. Teeth gritted, barely containing my fury. I said, I'll give you 5 minutes to gather your things and leave this house. Her lover, posturing with bravado, dismissed me. Listen, unfinished businessman. Go get yourself treated and don't interfere with normal people's lives. It's a pity you didn't crash back then. I gripped my cane, my anger boiling over. You won't have to wait, you bastard. You thought you buried me alive, but I survived against all odds, and I'm certain that the accident was staged. I'll make sure to uncover the truth. As I declared my intentions, the confidence of Grace's lover faltered, and he retreated into the house to change. The facade of a happy relationship with Grace crumbled as quickly as it had been constructed. I proceeded to sever Grace's access to their shared resources, blocking all her cards and accounts. Years ago, I had elevated Grace from provincial obscurity, shaping her into a semblance of a businesswoman, but no more. After such a betrayal, I was determined to see justice served. I contacted an investigator to reopen the fraud case Grace had allegedly not committed. In a final attempt to salvage her scheme, Grace lunged at me with a vase, but Erica intercepted her swiftly. The arrival of the police sealed their fate. I watched as Grace was handcuffed and led away, a mix of relief and exhaustion overwhelming me. Supported by Erica, I did not collapse but sank gently to the ground. As I recovered, surrounded not by plots and betrayal, but by genuine friends like Henry, Emma, and Connor, I considered a new future. Emma, having proved her loyalty and hard work, was offered a promotion. I openly expressed my feelings to Erica, eliciting joy and a burst of applause from our small, supportive crowd. Yes, I agree, but please, in the future, stay away from hospitals, Erica responded, her eyes glistening with tears. With laughter and plans for a future filled with love and integrity, I finally felt at peace, ready to turn a new page.
Daddy, the girl in the trunk is asking to be let out, our 5-year-old daughter said during a quiet family drive. Her innocent voice cut through the silence, making my heart skip a beat. I turned to my husband, trying to read his reaction. His face, which had been calm a moment ago, turned pale. I couldn't tell if he was trying to play dumb or was genuinely frightened by her words. He glanced back at our daughter through the rearview mirror, his eyes wide with fear. That's a scary thing to say, he muttered, trying to dismiss it. You shouldn't tell such lies. I glared at him from the passenger seat, feeling a knot of suspicion tightening in my chest. Maybe we should pull over at the rest area, I suggested, my voice sharper than I intended. It had been 6 years since we got married. I had always been supportive of my husband, even though his job kept him busy. I had been the one holding things together at home, managing everything while he focused on his career. But now, with our daughter's strange words hanging in the air, I felt a chill of uncertainty. Was something dark about to be revealed? My name is Lisa Jackson. I married my husband, James, when I was 30 years old. He is 5 years older than me, and our relationship had always seemed solid. The year after we got married, our daughter Julia was born, bringing so much joy into our lives. She's been growing up healthy and lively, and just recently turned 5. Our family had been living busy but happy days, filled with love and laughter. How about going to the zoo next Friday? James suggested, trying to change the mood. Yay! I want to see the giraffes. Julia squealed with excitement, her earlier comment seemingly forgotten. I couldn't help but smile at their cheerful conversation, feeling a bit of the tension ease away. James had always been a kind and loving husband. Since we started dating, he was attentive and caring, and that didn't change after we got married and had Julia. On his days off, he would eagerly join in on family activities, playing with Julia and making her laugh. He was the perfect father, always there for us. I often thought about how lucky I was to have married him. Watching James and Julia together brought me a deep sense of happiness. Our life was good, stable, and filled with love. But little did I know, those peaceful days were about to be shattered. One day, James came home with a heavy sigh, his face looking weary and troubled. You're being transferred to a different department, I asked, noticing his downcast expression. Yeah, he replied, his voice flat. It's company policy. They want me to gain experience in different places. His words felt like the first crack in our happy life. I didn't know why, but something about this transfer made me uneasy. I could sense that there was more to the story, something James wasn't telling me, and as our daughter's strange words echoed in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change in ways I couldn't imagine. James was being transferred to the busiest department in his company, which meant he might not be able to spend as much time with us. The news hit our family hard, especially Julia. Daddy, are you not going to play with me anymore? She asked, her big eyes filled with worry. James, trying his best to reassure her, gently stroked her hair and said, I'll do my best to spend as much time with you as possible, Julia. Let's go to the zoo again sometime soon. Despite his comforting words, I could see the regret in his expression. He knew this transfer was going to change things for us, and the thought of it weighed heavily on his mind. As I watched him with our daughter, a tightness grew in my chest, overwhelmed with emotions. The transfer didn't involve a change in salary or require us to move, but it was still a big deal for our family. Just the thought of having less time together made me feel incredibly lonely. However, I knew the one feeling the most vulnerable was James. Adjusting to a new, more demanding environment would be tough for him. Please don't push yourself too hard, I said, trying to hide the worry in my voice. I knew James had a tendency to throw himself fully into his work, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. That's why I worried about him overdoing it, and unfortunately, my concerns turned out to be justified. At first, James managed to balance his work and home life. He still made time for family activities and found moments to rest, despite his busier schedule. But about a month after the transfer, everything changed. His time at home decreased dramatically. He started working overtime, often coming home late at night, long after Julia had gone to bed. It became more common for him to go out for drinks with clients, and he even began working on his days off. But there was something else that concerned me even more. One day, I cautiously asked him, Hey, can you take a day off next Friday? Julia misses you, and you've been working too hard lately." James looked at me with a tired, frustrated expression. "Who do you think I'm working so hard for? Should I just turn down client meetings and risk getting fired?" he snapped. I quickly replied, "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about you." "That's none of your business," he muttered, brushing me off. "Anyway, make sure you have money ready for next week's drinking party." His words stung, and I could see how much the stress was affecting him. James, who had always been kind and patient, was now irritable and short-tempered. He started taking out his frustrations on me more frequently, and I found myself walking on eggshells around him. What worried me even more was how he was spending money extravagantly, claiming it was necessary for entertaining clients. This new habit was beginning to impact our living expenses, adding financial stress to an already tense situation. Because I knew how kind he used to be, I was more worried than angry about his current behavior. It was clear to me that the pressure of his new job was getting to him, and I feared he was going to collapse from overwork if things didn't change. I felt helpless, not knowing how to make things better for him or for our family. As the months passed, James's situation only worsened. 5 months after his transfer, he reached a point where he was coming home mostly just to sleep. Our conversations became brief, and the connection we once had felt distant. Julia, feeling the absence of her father, started to show signs of sadness. She often wore a forlorn expression, missing the time they used to spend together. Seeing her like that broke my heart. I knew we couldn't go on like this. I needed to find a way to help James before his relentless work schedule took an even bigger toll on our family. But I didn't know where to start, and the weight of it all was becoming too much to bear. I knew things couldn't go on like this, so I started trying to figure out a way for James to take a break. He was clearly overwhelmed, and our family was suffering because of it. But just as I was beginning to make plans, more bad things started to happen, almost as if the universe was working against us. The worst blow came when my mother, who had been battling an illness for several years, suddenly passed away in the hospital. The moment I heard the news, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "No, Mom," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My father had died when I was young, so my mother was the only parent I had left. Losing her felt like losing the last piece of my childhood. I couldn't even have a proper conversation with her before she passed away, and that regret weighed heavily on me. When the call came, I was at home, and I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while. I just stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me that she was really gone. But what hurt even more was James's reaction. When I told him about my mother's passing, his response was unbelievably cold. "Hey, do I have to go to that funeral too?" he asked, his voice completely devoid of sympathy. I stared at him, my eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, the relationship between James and my mother might have been distant, but she was still his mother-in-law. She was family. I couldn't understand how he could be so indifferent, especially at a time like this. "What are you saying?" "Of course, you have to go," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a family funeral." "Don't get mad at me," he muttered, rolling his eyes. "Oh, why does this have to happen now? I had plans too." His words cut through me like a knife. In the past, James would have comforted me, perhaps by rubbing my back and grieving with me together. But now, as he sighed in dissatisfaction, he seemed like a completely different person from the one I had promised to spend my life with. Naturally, he didn't help with any of the preparations for my mother's funeral. I arranged everything alone, feeling more isolated than ever. On the day of the service, James remained silent and sullen. He didn't offer any support or comfort, and after the funeral ended, he simply said, "It's over now, right? I'm heading home first," and left without helping with the cleanup. I was initially confused by his reaction, but by then, I had lost the energy to be angry. I was simply bewildered and deeply disappointed in him. No matter how busy or stressed he was from work, his behavior at the funeral was unacceptable. When did my husband become such a cold person? Despite feeling frustrated with him, I finished cleaning up with Julia by my side. She was too young to understand everything that was happening, but she could sense that something was wrong and did her best to help me. "Mom, Julia will help you," she said, her small voice bringing a bit of comfort to my aching heart. After the funeral, I decided to stop by my parents' house for a short while. It wasn't far from our home, and I wanted to say a final goodbye to the place that held so many memories of my mother. Although it was a sad visit, I felt it was something I needed to do for my own peace of mind. When I arrived at my parents' house with a heavy heart, I took a deep breath and walked inside. The house felt empty, a shell of what it used to be. As I stood in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's life, I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me. But before I could even begin to process my feelings, something unexpected happened. "Mom, wait a moment," Julia suddenly shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Huh, Julia, what's wrong?" I asked, startled by her sudden change in behavior. As soon as we arrived at my parents' house, Julia's expression had shifted dramatically. Without another word, she dashed straight into the back room, leaving me standing there, puzzled and concerned. I quickly followed her, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and confusion, wondering what could have caused her to react like this. I had taken Julia to visit my mother's place several times before, but I had never seen her act like this. Curious and concerned, I hurried to follow her as she moved with a sense of purpose. Julia stopped in front of the dresser, her small hands reaching for the second drawer from the bottom. It was as if something was drawing her to it. "Mom, Grandma wants you to have this," she said, holding up an old hand mirror. The sight of the mirror took my breath away. It was an item that had always been precious to my mother. She cherished it so much that she rarely used it, and I didn't even know where she kept it. I stood there, stunned, as I realized that Julia had somehow found this hidden treasure. "How did you know it was here? And what do you mean, Grandma wanted me to have it?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "When Grandma was sleeping earlier, she told me that you were sad and asked me to give this to you," Julia answered innocently, her eyes wide with sincerity. I couldn't hide my surprise. Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was no way Julia could have known about the existence of this hand mirror, let alone where it was kept. Yet here she was, holding it out to me with a calm certainty that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Wanting to understand what was happening, I decided to ask her some questions. I asked about things she couldn't possibly know, tomorrow's dinner menu I was thinking about, and even thoughts I had during the funeral. To my astonishment, Julia answered each question correctly, as if she had read my mind. It became clear to me that my daughter had a mysterious ability to know what people were thinking. I was both amazed and bewildered. "Wow, that's amazing, Julia. You know everything," I said, stroking her head gently, still trying to wrap my mind around this revelation. I had always thought that the idea of mysterious abilities was just something from stories, never imagining that my own daughter might possess such a power. Julia, proud of her newfound ability, put her hand on her hip and gave me a confident look. "That's right. Julia knows about Dad, too." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. What she told me next was incredibly unbelievable and unforgivable. Julia revealed things about James that shook me to my core. I listened in stunned silence as she spoke, realizing that the man I had married was not who I thought he was. A few weeks after my mother's funeral, I decided it was time to confront James. On a morning when he was getting ready to leave for work, I casually mentioned, "By the way, I'm visiting my friend with Julia next Friday." James, who had been focused on getting out the door, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He frowned, looking genuinely troubled. "Really? Oh no, I'm off that day." "That's too bad," he said, his voice filled with artificial concern. I could sense the insincerity in his tone. It was clear to me now that he was hiding something. I let out a small, knowing smile, careful not to reveal my true feelings. Now that I knew the truth, there was no love left for James inside me. That Friday, I left home with Julia as planned. We spent about an hour away, giving me time to gather my thoughts and prepare for what I needed to do. When we returned home, Julia pointed towards the garage and said, "Dad's over there." I took a deep breath and walked towards the garage, where the shutter was still down. My heart was pounding, but I knew what had to be done. I lightly knocked on the shutter and called out, "James, I know you're in there. Open it." There was a moment of silence, then a hesitant voice replied, "Huh, Lisa? I thought you and Julia had plans," James said, his voice filled with surprise. "It's canceled," I replied calmly. "If you're going somewhere, we want to come with you." He sounded flustered and hesitant, clearly not expecting this. "Oh, okay," he stammered, reluctant to open the garage shutter. I had a pretty good idea of what was going on inside, but decided to stay quiet and observe. "Julia wants to go for a drive too," I added, hearing the hope in her voice. Unable to resist, James had no choice but to agree. A few minutes later, he reluctantly opened the garage, and we started our drive together. Sitting in the passenger seat, I looked at James as he drove. His profile was tense, and it solidified my final decision. Life with James had been enjoyable and happy, but I knew those days would never come back. "Hey, did you know Julia has a special power?" I finally brought it up as we merged onto the highway. James furrowed his brows, confused by my sudden confession. "Huh, what's that supposed to mean?" "That's a silly joke," he laughed dismissively. "Daddy, the girl in the trunk is asking you to let her out." Julia suddenly raised her voice from the back seat. I watched as James's face turned pale. He glanced at our daughter through the rearview mirror with a frightened expression. "What a scary thing to say. You shouldn't tell such lies," he said nervously. "But it's true," Julia insisted. "Then should we pull over at the rest area?" I suggested, trying to support Julia's claim. James immediately looked at me, startled. "Huh, we don't need to do that. It's just a kid's joke," he said, trying to brush it off. "Julia has a mysterious power, you know. Besides, it's hot today, and it could be dangerous if someone's really in there." He must have thought my suggestion made sense. After flinching and stiffening, he reluctantly headed towards the rest area with a contorted expression on his face. Upon arrival, we left Julia in the air-conditioned car and went outside to check the trunk. "I don't think there's anything in there. Come on, quickly," I urged to James, who was hesitating. Realizing he couldn't escape anymore, James nervously opened the trunk, breaking into a cold sweat. In the next moment, a young woman jumped out, her face flushed red from the heat. "I knew you were cheating," I shouted, my suspicions confirmed. The young woman, looking embarrassed and uncomfortable, stood there while James shook his head nervously. "No, it's not like that. She is a colleague from work. We were just working together," he stammered, trying to explain. "Wow, working in the trunk of our car?" I retorted sarcastically. "At the new apartment you're doing a job?" James's excuses were pathetic and unbelievable. It turned out that while Julia and I were out, James had been cheating with this woman at home. They were about to go for a drive when we returned unexpectedly, so he had no choice but to hide her in the trunk. As the woman was taken away, James seemed unable to grasp the situation fully. He kept trying to come up with more excuses, but I wasn't listening anymore. I knew our marriage was over. The trust and love we once had were gone, replaced by betrayal and lies. I looked at Julia, who was watching everything quietly from the car. I knew I had to be strong for her, to move on and build a new life without James. I laughed at how ridiculous James's lie was, standing my ground as I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. "And what is this?" I asked, showing him the paper. It read, "Let's go on a drive date on Friday." James and the woman, Janice, turned pale when they saw it. It was no surprise they could see their flirty email exchanges printed right there. Thanks to Julia, I had found out everything. On the day of my mother's funeral at my parents' house, my daughter had told me, Daddy has been spending a lot of time with Janice lately. I'm sad because Janice is taking Daddy away from me. After witnessing Julia's strange ability to know things, I became suspicious and decided to keep an eye on James. Sure enough, I found undeniable proof of his affair on his phone. So I had made up the fake plan to catch him in the act. It's a shame this drive turned out this way, I said sarcastically. It's unfair to look through my phone without permission. James protested, his body tense as he reacted to my words. His absurd remark made me burst into laughter. I had thought he was just busy with work, but it turned out he was spending time with Janice, using our money for their dates. Who exactly is being unfair here? I shot back. By the way, I've been recording everything since we got into the car. Remembering all the wrongs James had done, I pulled out my phone from my pocket. I had secretly pressed the record button to capture everything. And the evidence I had wasn't just messages and this video. I also set up hidden cameras in our house and garage. And Janice, I know everything about you too. Under my relentless confrontation, they both turned white as sheets. I was furious with James, but I couldn't forgive Janice either. I had thoroughly investigated my husband and figured out who she was. Janice was a 27-year-old new employee who worked with James in his new department. From the messages, it was clear she knew about me, yet she still went ahead with the affair, making her just as guilty. Sorry, Lisa. James whimpered, clearly not expecting to be cornered so perfectly. His pitiful attempt to plead with me only filled me with more disgust. I glared at both of them with all the anger I could muster. I won't forgive either of you. Get ready to pay alimony. Hearing my firm words, and perhaps realizing their fate, both of them collapsed to their knees. After that, I divorced James. The fact that I had recorded everything and gathered all the evidence paid off. They were ordered to pay $500,000 in compensation. I was also able to get $1,000 a month in child support from my husband. But their troubles didn't stop there. I heard that news of their affair spread throughout the whole company, especially since they worked in the same department. This made things very uncomfortable for them, and eventually, they broke up. Their coworkers started to disapprove of them, and in the end, they had no choice but to resign. Now, I've heard they're struggling with the burden of the compensation payments and are left with nothing. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying peaceful days with Julia. I'm focused on giving her lots of love and support, knowing she has a special gift. I want to make sure she grows up happy and well taken care of. Hello everyone, my name is Lily. Today, I want to share a story about my awful stepmother, Julie. I'll call her Julie because she never acted like a mother to me or even wanted to try. When my dad, Jacob, first introduced me to Julie, she made it clear that she didn't want to be my mother. She said to me, I don't want you thinking I'm going to be your mother. You're just my husband's daughter, nothing more. You're a teenager, so don't expect me to do anything for you. I replied, That's okay, Julie. I can take care of myself. I just want my dad to be happy. I won't get in the way. She shot back, You're already in the way, you little witch. Don't try to act smart with me. I know how to handle worthless teens like you. Once you turn 17, I'll make sure you're out of our lives so I can have Jacob all to myself. The conversation got nasty really fast. Julie said some horrible things about me and my late mother. My dad was a widower, and my mom passed away when I was just 7 years old. I miss her a lot, and it took my dad a long time to start dating again. That's one reason why I never told him about Julie's terrible words or behavior. Looking back, it was a big mistake to stay quiet because Julie became a nightmare after she married my dad. Even my dad was surprised by her behavior. Julie always targeted me and tried her best to kick me out of the house. She made it clear that she hated kids and didn't want me around. She never told my dad this before they started dating. When my dad refused to abandon me, she began to find ways to make my life miserable. She would ruin her own food and blame it on me. She'd say, "Look at what your daughter did, Jacob. She spoiled my cooking because I refused to cook for her. She's going to poison me one day." Then my dad would ask, "Lily, what's your explanation for this?" "Dad, I swear I don't know anything about this. I'm happy to cook my own food. I wasn't even home before you came back. I got takeout to eat in my room," I said, trying to explain. Julie interrupted, "Oh God, she's lying, Jacob. You need to get rid of her before she kills me." This was just one example of what Julie had been doing for the past 5 years. This whole mess was over too much salt in her food, which she had added herself just to blame me. It was crazy, but Dad believed me because I had enough proof. Over the years, she did much worse. She cut off my phone connection, locked me out of the house for 8 hours, took my car keys on the day of an important test, and even threw away a project I had worked on for a week. Dad tried his best to make Julie understand that her actions were not okay, but she never listened. She would act nice for a few days and then do something terrible again. By the time Julie had been with us for a year, I got a job and started paying for my own things. I wanted to avoid any interference from her in my life. Dad was upset, but I told him it was good for me to have my own money. I didn't want him to feel guilty. Julie, being a stay-at-home wife, considered Dad's money as her own and didn't want him spending much on me, not even for basic needs. I tried to stay out of her way as much as possible, hoping she'd leave me alone. But she never got the hint and kept bothering me. She was determined to get rid of me from her life and the house, but she had no idea what was coming. The big drama happened a few weeks after my 17th birthday. Since then, Julie had been in a great mood, often singing happily around the house. I knew why she was so cheerful. She thought she could finally get rid of me. Little did she know, I had overheard her talking to her friend on the phone about how she planned to kick me out. I was aware of her plan, but she had no idea what was coming for her. One day, I came home from work and saw my stuff packed in my room. Instead of being upset, I was amused. I said, "Hey Julie, why is my stuff packed and waiting in my room? Are we going on vacation?" "Don't act so smart, Lily. I hope you remember my words," she snapped back. "I told you that once you turned 17, I would make you leave. Well, now it's time for you to go. I've decided to be nice and pack your things to make it easier for you. You want to kick me out of my house. Oh no, Lily, this is my house and I don't need to keep you here anymore. I'll deal with Jacob later, but you are definitely leaving." Julie had a smug look on her face, showing like she was happy with herself. She was already thinking about what to do with my room. But I said, "Not so fast, Julie. Karma is coming for you." I calmly took some papers from my bag and gave them to her. She looked confused, so I smirked and said, "I think you should look at these papers first, Julie. I've been meaning to give them to you for a while. It's good you mentioned eviction today. It reminded me of these documents." "What are these papers? Why do I need to read them?" she asked. "Why don't you take a look and find out?" I replied. Julie sat down and started to read the papers I had given her. At first, she looked confused, then her face changed to shock and disbelief. She looked at me, then back at the papers. Her expression turned angry. "Is this an eviction notice in my name?" "What the hell, Lily? What does this mean?" she asked. "It means I want you out of my house in a month. You know, the usual thing an eviction notice means," I said. "You can't serve me eviction papers. You can't do that. This is my house, and I'm the only one who can kick people out," she yelled. No, Julie, this is my house and always has been. My dad was just a caretaker who held it for me until I turned 17. Now that I'm 17, the house is mine. I recently finished the paperwork," I explained. No, that's impossible. Jacob can't just give you this house. This is our marital property, and he can't give it to you without asking me," she protested. "How is this a marital property, Julie? Dad had this house long before you were around. I guess he didn't tell you that it belonged to my maternal grandparents." They left it to me and had Dad take care of it until I was old enough, I said. I turned 17 just a few weeks ago. No, you must be lying to me. This can't be true. You're trying to scam me and kick me out of the house. Wait till your father hears about this. He will kick you out instead, Julie yelled. She made the mistake of calling my father downstairs, forgetting she never asked him if she could kick me out. Even if the house belonged to him, she should have asked. She knew he would say no, so she tried to do it behind his back. In her rush, she forgot this detail and decided to involve Dad. I wasn't complaining. It was better for me this way. Dad came downstairs to see what all the yelling was about. He said, "Whoa, calm down, Julie. Why are you screaming like that? What's wrong? Why wouldn't I be screaming? Your daughter is making wild claims again. She says this house belongs to her and she's kicking me out," Julie shouted. Dad turned to me and asked, "Lily, what is going on? I need to know the truth." I knew Dad would ask for my side. He's a good father and knows his wife can be very mean. He always listens to both sides before taking action, which Julie hated. She wanted him to always side with her, no matter who was right. They fought about this a lot, but Dad wanted to be fair to everyone. That's why he asked for my side too. I explained. Julie called me down and said she was kicking me out. She told me I couldn't stay in her house anymore. I knew she was planning this because I overheard her talking on the phone. So I decided to kick her out instead. I gave her an eviction notice. Dad was shocked and turned to Julie. "What the hell, Julie? Who gave you permission to try and kick my daughter out? You never discussed this with me. Why am I hearing about this now?" Julie realized she had made a mistake. She was so upset by the eviction notice that she forgot she'd be caught. I saw her panic for a moment, then she turned hostile and defensive like she always does. She snapped, "Your daughter is already an adult, Jacob." She had turned 17, and we let her stay in the house for a month without paying rent. Most parents kick their kids out when they turn 17. We need to make Lily learn to live on her own and become responsible. That's for me to decide, Julie. You are not, and never have been, her parent. You didn't even help with anything related to Lily. How did you think it was okay to decide when to kick out my daughter? You were being unfair, Jacob. All these years, I put up with your favoritism because Lily was a teenager. But now she needs to go. I won't let her stay in my house anymore. Who said this is your house? Which deed shows this house is in your name? Well, it's your place, so I have equal rights to it since I am your wife. This is my house too. I won't allow Lily here anymore. She needs to go. This is not your house, and even if it was, you have no right to it. This is Lily's house, and it's in her name. Julie went pale when she heard that. She didn't expect my dad to agree with me and say the house belonged to me. She lived in her own world where everything was hers just because she said so. Hearing otherwise was a big shock for her. She started to cry and said, "Why would you say such a thing, Jacob?" "Because the house belongs to Lily. I'm just telling the truth. What's wrong with that? You gave Lily the house without talking to me. How could you do this, Jacob? I'm your wife. You should have discussed this with me. I am not okay with this. You had no problem going behind my back and trying to kick my daughter out. Why can't I do the same, Julie? Talk about double standards. There was nothing to discuss. This house was always meant for Lily. I was just the trustee who took care of it until she turned 17. The house was transferred to her name recently." Julie finally understood that we were telling the truth. Dad even offered to show her the papers if she needed proof. She was in too much shock to say anything coherent. She just said, "You deceived me, Jacob. I thought the house was yours. You lied to me. This is not fair." "I never lied to you, Julie. You never asked whose house this was when we got married. We signed a prenup that said our personal assets stay personal." "Oh my God, this can't be true. You should have told me, Jacob. Now Lily is throwing us out. Look at how ungrateful your daughter is." Jacob, I'm not throwing you out, Julie. That's just for you. You won't get to live in my house anymore. I might have let you stay, but after you tried to kick me out, I changed my mind. You're the one who has to leave. If you kick me out, your dad will follow too. We're a couple. He won't leave his wife. My father laughed out loud. He had been thinking about leaving Julie for a while, but he wasn't sure. Today made the decision easy for him. He said, "Actually, no, Julie. I'm not following you. I will stay here and take care of my daughter. I've been thinking about divorce for a while, and what you did today sealed the deal. I'll be filing tomorrow. Be ready for it." "Wait, are you going to divorce me? You want to leave me for your daughter? You can't do that." "Yes, I can, Julie. Did you think I'd forgive you for tormenting my daughter for 4 years? Absolutely not. I thought you might change, but I see now you'll always be toxic. I don't want someone like that in my or my daughter's life." Julie stepped back as if she had been hurt. She never expected a divorce so soon. My dad is usually a quiet man who doesn't do anything drastic. This was very unlike him. He was mad, and you could see it on his face. He didn't shout, but his tone showed how angry he was. This made Julie even more anxious. She started arguing with my dad, and I decided to leave them and go to my room. Dad and Julie fought for an hour, with Julie shouting and crying while my father calmly explained his reasons. After the argument, Dad came to my room. He seemed a bit sad and wouldn't look me in the eye. He sat down and said, "Lily, I know I need to apologize to you. I'm sorry, dear. I should have done a better job of protecting you from Julie. I thought being fair and avoiding fights would make things better. I was wrong and made things worse for you." "You don't have to apologize, Dad. I know you loved Julie, and she wasn't like this when you married her. People change, and it can take time to understand these changes." "Wow, you've really grown up. I wish I had handled things differently. I brought a mad woman into our lives." "Well, what's done is done. I forgive you, Dad. You tried your best, and I'm not upset. Do you really want to divorce Julie? I won't be mad if you don't. I would understand. Girl, I'm not living with that crazy woman anymore. I'm done. Her true colors shocked me too much to act sooner. I don't want her in my life anymore. I had a feeling something was wrong with Julie, which is why I made the prenup. I was worried she'd mess up your future and cause money problems, so I thought this was the best way. See, you did think about me too. You deserve to be happy, Dad. That's all I want. If Julie doesn't mean anything to you anymore, it's best to separate." I spent a lot of time assuring my dad that he was not a bad parent. He did a lot for me, and I needed to make him believe that too. I won't lie, I was super happy that my dad was finally getting rid of that crazy woman, Julie. She wasn't the right person for him and shouldn't stay married to him after everything she did over the years. The talk with my dad went well, and he went to the guest room to sleep that night. I finally felt peaceful knowing that Julie would soon be out of our lives for good. It felt great to teach her a lesson. I hoped she would remember this for the rest of her life. The real surprise came the next morning when I found Julie acting way too nice and caring towards me. She was in the kitchen making me breakfast and acting like I was the most important person to her. Even Dad was giving her a strange look and looked at me with confusion. When breakfast was over, I said, "Thanks for breakfast, Julie, but you don't have to do this anymore. I can make my own food, as I have for the last 7 years. No need to change things all of a sudden." "What nonsense, Lily. I'm happy to do this for you. Eating together can bring us closer as a family," she replied. "What's the point? We won't be a family much longer. You should have done this years ago. It's too late now." "Oh, come on, Jacob. Don't be so hard on me. I'm trying. I can make this work. I'll start being a better parent to Lily. We'll be the best mother-daughter duo ever, right, Lily?" I knew what Julie was trying to do. She was cornered and spent the night coming up with a plan. I knew better than to trust her. Looking at Dad, I could see he wasn't going to trust her either. He just looked a bit amused. Since Julie was waiting for my response, I said, "I don't think so, Julie. First of all, I'm 17 and don't need a new parent. I pay my own bills and will be off to college soon. Secondly, you are not and will never be my mother. That word doesn't suit you at all. Lily, I'm sorry for being so mean to you before. You need to give people a chance. We could be a happy family if you just give me a chance. It will also help strengthen my marriage with your dad." Dad replied, "Julie, you have a few months left of this marriage. I don't know what you're trying to strengthen. If it's an attempt to stay in this house, I'm sorry to say it won't work. You're being kicked out, and I'm going to divorce you anyway. The damage is already done. There's no point in trying to act all innocent and sorry now. I know you better than that, Julie." She saw that her new plan wasn't working, and it seemed like she had run out of options. Julie couldn't threaten to ruin Dad financially because of the prenup she had signed when they got married. She had no leverage left. Her only remaining tactic was to beg and cry, hoping for some sympathy. She started crying hysterically, pleading with me not to kick her out. She begged me to talk to Dad and ask him to give her another chance. She then turned to Dad, begging him to be more forgiving and to reconsider his decision to divorce her. The entire day turned into a long, painful ordeal with Julie begging and pleading for mercy. Since both Dad and I were off work that day, we had no choice but to endure her desperate attempts to change our minds. She followed us around the house, tears streaming down her face, and her voice trembling with desperation. Dad had to step out for a while to contact his lawyer and start the divorce process. Julie's pleas continued even when Dad was gone, as she tried to convince me to intervene on her behalf. When Dad returned, he was visibly tired of the drama. He informed Julie that he had already taken steps to file for divorce. Julie's face went pale when she heard this. She realized that her attempts to sway us were futile. The next few days were filled with more of Julie's emotional breakdowns. She would alternate between crying and trying to put on a cheerful face, hoping to win us over with kindness, but it was too late for that. Within a week, Julie received the divorce papers. Dad's lawyer had them delivered to her, and her reaction was a mix of shock and resignation. The realization that her marriage was over seemed to hit her hard. She stopped her begging and crying after receiving the papers, understanding that her efforts were in vain. The cold reality of her situation started to set in. Dad and I sat her down and explained that she would need to find a job if she wanted to have a place to live and afford a lawyer for her divorce proceedings. Julie, still clinging to the hope that she could somehow fix things, promised she would find a way to support herself. She was convinced that she could change our minds if she tried hard enough. She kept saying that she would prove herself and make things right, but we both knew it was too late. As the days passed, Julie's presence in the house became more and more unbearable. She would try to engage in conversations, acting as if nothing had happened, but it was clear that neither Dad nor I wanted to have anything to do with her anymore. The tension in the house was palpable, and every interaction with her felt forced and uncomfortable. Finally, the month came to an end, and Julie was still holding on to the hope that we would let her stay. She kept her belongings packed, waiting for a last-minute change of heart from us. But when the time came, there was no reprieve. We had been clear about our intentions from the start, and now it was time to follow through. Julie was given a firm deadline to leave the house. Dad and I stood by, watching as she gathered her things. She tried one last time to plead with us, her eyes filled with tears and desperation. But we remained steadfast. Julie's belongings were taken out, and she was escorted out of the house. She looked back at us one last time, hoping for a sign of mercy, but there was none. As the door closed behind her, a wave of relief washed over me. The house felt lighter, freer, without the constant tension and negativity that Julie brought. Dad and I shared a moment of quiet understanding, knowing that this was the right decision. We had endured enough, and now it was time to move forward, leaving Julie and her manipulations behind. She made a fuss when we told her to leave, but after Dad threatened her with more legal trouble, she left crying. I heard she moved in with a friend because her own family doesn't want her around anymore. When she left, she took all the negativity with her, and the house finally felt like home again. It's been more than 3 years since all this happened. I'm now in college, which is conveniently close to home. Dad successfully divorced Julie and has started dating again. He says he's not looking to settle down, but just wants some companionship from time to time. Life at home has been peaceful since Julie left, and Dad and I have grown closer. We often laugh about the drama that once filled our lives and how much better things are now. As for Julie, the last I heard, she moved into a small flat with several roommates. She's struggling to make ends meet because she doesn't have many skills or qualifications. Julie is working a minimum wage job and is just barely getting by. She's living a very different life from the one she tried to control in our house. I saw her from a distance at a grocery store a few months ago. She looked worn out and seemed to have aged a lot. Her hair was messy, and she had dark circles under her eyes. She looked nothing like the confident woman who tried to take over our lives. It was clear that life had taken its toll on her, and she was no longer the powerful person she once pretended to be. Seeing her like that made me realize that karma had caught up with her. She tried to manipulate us and take control, but in the end, she ended up with nothing. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief knowing that she was no longer a part of our lives and that we were finally free from her negativity. The house, once filled with tension and arguments, now felt warm and welcoming. My dad and I have been able to move on with our lives. We often talk about how much better things are now and how grateful we are to have each other. Dad has even started taking up new hobbies like gardening and cooking, things he never had time for when Julie was around. We've created a peaceful and happy home, one that is full of love and laughter. Julie's departure has been a blessing for both of us. It has allowed us to rebuild our lives and focus on what truly matters. We no longer have to deal with her constant drama and manipulation. Instead, we've been able to enjoy the simple pleasures of life, like spending time together and making new memories. As for Julie, I hope she has learned from her mistakes. Life has not been easy for her, and I believe that she has finally realized that you can't build happiness on lies and deceit. The last time I heard anything about her, she was still struggling to make ends meet and living a very difficult life. She's working hard to survive, and I think she has finally understood the consequences of her actions. I don't wish anything bad on her. I hope that she can find a way to turn her life around and learn to live with honesty and integrity. Perhaps the struggles she's facing now will teach her valuable lessons and help her become a better person. In the end, everyone deserves a chance to change and improve their lives. Looking back, I'm grateful for the challenges we faced. They made us stronger and brought us closer together. My dad and I have become a great team, and we've learned to appreciate each other even more. We've built a life filled with love, respect, and understanding, and for that, I am truly thankful. Julie's story serves as a reminder that trying to hurt others and take what isn't yours will only lead to your own downfall. It's important to live a life of kindness, honesty, and respect for others. I hope Julie has found some peace in her new life and has learned from the mistakes she made. As for us, we are happier than ever, and we know that no matter what challenges come our way, we can face them together with strength and love. My name is Lisa, and I am 37 years old. I live with my husband Larry. We both work for the company that my father-in-law founded. Even though my father-in-law has retired, he built a small construction company into a business that makes $300 billion a year. He bought other construction companies, and while he was sometimes tough, everyone admires his great business skills. Larry, who was chosen to follow in his father's footsteps, was raised as a pampered child and has a gentle character. I worry that he isn't strong enough for the tough business world. While being gentle might sound good, in reality, he is very indecisive. I have started to feel he isn't fit to be a husband, let alone a CEO. Larry has even admitted, I'm not cut out to be a CEO. I'll probably just be a figurehead if I become one. It's easier for me that way. He shows no real intention of seriously taking over the company. We've been married for 10 years, and lately I've grown frustrated with his lack of initiative. In contrast to Larry, I consider myself to be quite decisive. It seems my father-in-law, during his active years, appreciated this about me and gave me various tasks to do. Before marrying Larry, I worked at a bank, so I am used to managing finances and always think about the numbers while working. When I got married, I quit my job at the bank and planned to become a full-time homemaker. However, my father-in-law asked me to work for the construction company instead. Shortly after I started working, my father-in-law began inviting me to participate in board meetings and asked for my opinion on management matters. At first, the board members seemed skeptical about including the founder's daughter-in-law in important meetings. But as I consistently provided useful insights, they started listening to my suggestions. Although Larry was also a board member, he rarely attended meetings, and this was accepted by the other board members and my father-in-law as normal. When I came home from a meeting one day, I found Larry casually watching TV. "Why didn't you attend today's meeting?" I asked angrily. "You're a key member. You should take it seriously." Without showing any guilt, he replied, "Even if I go, I don't really understand the discussions. Besides, the board members prefer you, so there's no problem, right?" I wondered if he was upset by my involvement in board meetings, though he made such remarks. My father-in-law has been teaching me the details of running the business and seems to be grooming me as a successor. I started enjoying being involved in management, and before I knew it, I was working hard to meet my father-in-law's expectations. About 3 years after I started attending meetings, my father-in-law retired completely. When there were major decisions to be made, the board members would consult me while Larry was sidelined. I had hoped that being in such a situation would push Larry to work harder, but instead, he became even more disengaged from his work. Although he would come to the office in the morning, he'd disappear somewhere by noon and just stay home for the rest of the day. When he saw me at home, he wouldn't talk about work at all, seeming indifferent to the company's affairs. Meanwhile, my workload at the company was increasing, and I was getting busier. After my father-in-law's retirement, the board members relied on me more and more, and I was given duties similar to a CEO's. Given that we're a large company with many employees, I've been committed to increasing sales and profit for the sake of our workers. With the hard work of our employees, our sales began to grow. I found running the company more interesting and became more engrossed in my work. Conversely, my husband Larry seemed to be losing interest in his work, and his appearances at the company began to diminish. The conversation between us at home had lessened, and our relationship began to become tense. "I ran into your sister Nancy today, and we had lunch together," Larry said when he came home. My sister Nancy is 3 years older than me and had just divorced about 4 months ago. The cause of her divorce was infidelity on her part, which led to a big commotion when her enraged husband stormed into our parents' home. My husband Larry went to my parents' house to calm down Nancy's husband in my place since I was busy with work. Larry, who had a gentle upbringing and a calming personality, managed to convince Nancy's raging husband to leave for the time being. Later, Nancy told me, "Your husband is really something. He handled my raging husband so effortlessly." She praised Larry. Nancy's husband, in his anger, must have been disarmed by Larry's calm and easygoing demeanor. Nancy was able to divorce her husband after paying alimony, but since this incident, she seemed to look at Larry differently. Until then, she seemed to have thought of Larry, who was not particularly attractive and is indecisive, as just a rich, pampered son. But after the incident, she seemed to believe he was a respectable business owner. Nancy, now single after her divorce, probably saw Larry as a great catch as she always loved wealthy men. But I, who was engrossed in work, could not imagine such a thing. Of course, my sister wouldn't have known that Larry is just a nominal executive who doesn't actually manage the company. Nancy's ex-husband was an elite employee of a foreign company and bragged to me at their wedding, "My husband is an excellent employee with a high salary, and on top of that, he's handsome. You're jealous, aren't you?" Her ex-husband was handsome, smart, and carried a stylish vibe. I couldn't understand why she would cheat on such a wonderful husband. 5 months after hearing from Larry that he had lunch with Nancy, I returned home to find Larry unusually serious. "Lisa, I have something to discuss," he said. It was the first time I had heard such words from him, and I had a bad feeling. With my heart pounding, I waited for him to speak. "Actually, Nancy is pregnant with my child, and I want a divorce," he said. I was shocked by the request for a divorce, but even more surprised to hear that Nancy was pregnant. At a loss for words, Larry continued, "Nancy is planning to come over on our next date off to discuss this. So I'm counting on you," he said. I was stunned. I asked him, "So you want to marry my sister?" With a troubled look, Larry responded, "It's not that I want to marry her, but if she's having my baby, I guess I have no choice." I sighed at Larry's typical indecisiveness and replied, "Well, if she's carrying your baby, I suppose it can't be helped. Let's discuss this when she comes over." It seemed like my husband, and I couldn't make any decisions together, so I decided to meet directly with my sister to figure things out. Even though I had already made up my mind to divorce, I thought I needed to consult my father-in-law about the company's situation. As the daughter-in-law of the founder, I was involved in running the business, but if I divorced, I would become a stranger. The next day, I went to my in-laws' house and told my father-in-law exactly what my husband had said. My mother-in-law, who was present, was thrilled that her son had a child, but she quieted down when glared at by my father-in-law. For my mother-in-law, she seemed to be more concerned about her grandchild than the company's management. After some thought, my father-in-law said with a smile, "Lisa, I want you to continue to be involved in the company's management as you have been. I don't care about Larry. I'll take the responsibility, so let him do what he likes." It seemed that my father-in-law valued the management of the company more than his son or grandchild. Even though he has retired, my father-in-law, as the founder, still has a strong voice in the company, and most of the company's shares are held by him. So there are no executives who go against his will. I was also getting interested in my work and was reluctant to give up now. Now that my job was settled, it was time to discuss the future with my sister. On my day off, my sister came to my house with a big smile and said, "Lisa, it's a pity you couldn't have a baby. I'll give you plenty of consolation money. Please leave this house immediately." She said it with a triumphant air. My husband was just silently listening to our conversation without saying anything, despite being the one who caused the problem. I was appalled at my husband's indifferent face and said, "It's okay to get divorced, but there's also the issue of alimony and division of property, so let's bring in a lawyer and decide properly." "I never thought you, my sister, would fall for a man like Larry," I retorted to my sister with irony. My sister glared at me with a stern face for a moment, but quickly regained her composure. I finally realized that it's not about looks in men, it's about what's inside. It was funny to hear my sister talk as if she fully understood my husband's inner self. Holding back my laughter, I said, "That's great, isn't it? From now on, live happily with Larry." The inner self my sister was talking about might be money. She seemed to think my husband was the president of my father-in-law's company, but it didn't seem like she had heard anything from him. When the discussion was over, my sister said she would start living here and brought a moving company. Though I only took out the necessary items, knowing my quick-tempered sister, I had already arranged for a new apartment. I also hired a lawyer and had documents prepared for the division of property and alimony claims. The next day, after moving out my belongings, I started negotiations for alimony and the division of property with my husband and sister, accompanied by my lawyer. My husband was still there, sitting with an indifferent face, and only my sister was speaking. As I said before, I'm willing to pay as much alimony as you want, so please decide at your convenience, my sister said. Hearing my sister's words, my lawyer decided to also claim alimony against my sister in addition to my husband. My sister is still paying alimony in installments to her ex-husband, so my lawyer had said in advance that it might be impossible to claim alimony from her. But since she said she would pay me as much as I wanted, I decided to make a claim. When it came to negotiations about the division of property, my sister excitedly said, "This mansion is originally Larry's family's, so it shouldn't be part of the division of property, right?" The lawyer answered my sister calmly, "This building and the land belong to the company, so it's up to the company to decide." It seemed like even my husband thought this house belonged to his father. "Is that so? I thought this house was Dad's," he said casually. My sister, on the other hand, was taken aback and confronted the lawyer. "Wait a minute, so does that mean I can't live in this house?" The lawyer responded in a businesslike manner. "Since it's company property, you can continue to live here if the company allows it." At this comment, my sister seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. "Oh, you should have said that earlier. It'll be fine since Larry, the president, will be living here." The lawyer looked surprised for a moment, then burst into laughter. "What are you talking about? Lisa is the president, not Larry." Looking at my sister, who planned to remarry my husband but didn't even know this, made me laugh. She immediately turned to my husband and yelled, "Huh, Larry, you're not the president." I stepped in for my husband, who looked troubled, and explained to my sister, "Larry is merely an advisor without any executive rights. I'm an executive director, and I was also made president. Our father-in-law, the founder, had always been the president, but when he retired, he made me an executive director and president." The other executives appreciated my performance, and there was no opposition. On the other hand, my husband, thanks to his father's arrangement, was receiving an executive salary as an advisor without executive rights. It's more of a pity than being a mere employee. Even though it's called an executive salary, since he wasn't really doing any work, it was less than what an ordinary employee would get. So I was bearing all the living expenses. My husband, who didn't care about our household finances, didn't even care whether the house he was living in was company-owned or belonged to his father. Although our home was company-owned, my responsible father-in-law had always charged me rent. Though I thought of it as a normal rental property, the lawyer, still laughing, asked me, "Can we continue to rent this house to Larry?" My sister reacted to the rent part of the lawyer's question. "What do you mean by rent? Are you suggesting that I take rent from Larry? Isn't it the company's property? Just make it free." The lawyer presented the rent amount, laughing heartily at her words. She was shocked to see the figure, and so was her husband Larry, who seemed to be hearing about it for the first time. "Guess a house this big does have a high rent. I can't afford that with my salary," he said. His executive compensation would barely leave any money behind if he had to pay that rent. Their living expenses would be hard to cover. During the 6 years of our marriage, Larry had used up all his modest executive compensation. My salary also disappeared in high rent and living expenses. There were hardly any assets left, and splitting the savings was the only way for asset division. After the lawyer left, my sister, who now knew that the mansion she had been hoping for was actually rented, seemed utterly deflated, staring blankly. Larry was grinning as usual. I suggested, "Why don't you move out and go back to your parents' house? Your mother was so happy about the pregnancy news." Larry agreed, but I couldn't help laughing inside at why I had to consider this man who was about to be my ex. I started worrying if this unreliable man could raise a child, but then I decided it was none of my business. I asked my sister, who seemed to have forgotten about her own alimony, "Are you okay with the alimony payment, sis? You seemed pretty confident, but But you're also paying your ex-husband, right? She was stunned to hear this, her face suddenly snapping back to reality. Alimony? I have to pay it too? She asked, astonished, seemingly having heard nothing of the discussion earlier. You said, I'll give plenty of alimony, but you weren't expecting me to pay it, right? My salary is really low, she continued. Larry and my sister exchanged surprised glances. Watching these two made me want to burst into laughter. I had already obtained signatures on the divorce papers and alimony request documents. It didn't matter to me, but seeing Larry and my sister like this was pathetic. My ex-husband, who had remarried my sister, had returned to his parents' home just as I had warned. But there seemed to be constant quarrels between my sister and my in-laws. The main cause of the conflict was the lie about my sister being pregnant with my ex-husband's child. His mother, who was hoping for a grandchild, was extremely angry. My father-in-law, who had disliked my sister for stealing his son from me from the very beginning, hadn't even spoken to her. He fronted the alimony for Larry, and I was paid in full. But my sister, seeing this, pleaded with him, Dad, could you please pay my alimony as well? To this, my father-in-law responded, I have no reason to be called Dad by you. He was fuming. Not being able to obtain anything she had hoped for, my sister ran away from my ex-husband's family home without a word and went missing. She had practically remarried my ex-husband just to bear the burden of alimony, which was utterly foolish. My ex-husband seemed to consider getting back with me, but his father scolded him. You're the kind of man who should never even think about having a family. You can't even take care of yourself properly. As I watched all this unfold, I reflected on how things had gotten to this point. When Larry first agreed to go back to his parents' house, I knew it was for the best. His mother was thrilled about the baby, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Larry was completely unprepared for the responsibilities of parenthood. His indifferent attitude throughout our marriage hadn't changed, and I doubted it ever would. Seeing my sister's shock when she realized she had to pay alimony was almost comical. She had been so confident, but she clearly hadn't thought things through. Her financial situation was already strained, and adding more payments would only make it worse. I wondered how she could be so naive. The negotiations for alimony and the division of property were surprisingly straightforward. My lawyer was thorough and ensured that everything was handled fairly. Larry and my sister, however, seemed lost and overwhelmed by the process. They exchanged glances of surprise and confusion, making it clear that they hadn't fully grasped the reality of their situation. Moving out of the house was a significant step for me. I had already found a new apartment and made arrangements to start fresh. The house, which I had once thought of as a home, now felt like a burden lifted off my shoulders. It was company property anyway, so leaving it behind felt like shedding the last remnants of my life with Larry. After I moved out, the tension between my sister and my in-laws only grew. The lie about her being pregnant with my ex-husband's child had caused a rift that couldn't be mended. My father-in-law, who had never approved of my sister, was especially vocal in his disapproval. He had always seen her as someone who had disrupted our family, and this latest deception only confirmed his worst fears. My sister's plea for my father-in-law to pay her alimony was met with cold rejection. I have no reason to be called Dad by you, he said, his anger evident. Her dreams of a carefree life supported by my ex-husband's family crumbled, and she found herself without the support she had expected. Eventually, my sister ran away from my ex-husband's family home without a word. She vanished, leaving behind the chaos she had created. Her attempt to remarry my ex-husband and secure financial stability had backfired spectacularly. She had only succeeded in creating more problems for herself and those around her. My ex-husband, realizing the mess he was in, seemed to consider getting back with me. But his father, ever the voice of reason, scolded him harshly. You're the kind of man who should never even think about having a family. You can't even take care of yourself properly, he said. In the end, I moved on from the whole ordeal. I focused on my work and my new life, leaving behind the drama that had consumed my marriage. It was clear that Larry and my sister had their own paths to navigate, and I was no longer a part of their tangled lives. The experience had taught me a lot about trust, responsibility, and the importance of making decisions for oneself. I would never get back with my ex-husband, even if he begged me. I stopped believing in him when he cheated on me with my sister, and I was disgusted by his indifferent attitude during our discussions. He was fired from his executive position and is now working as a temporary employee. The way he behaved during our marriage and after the affair showed me that he was not someone I could rely on or trust. His lack of commitment to our relationship and the company made it clear that he wasn't suited for the responsibilities he had. Seeing him now, reduced from an executive to a temporary employee, only reinforces my decision to move on without him. I've continued being the CEO, which is the most important thing in my life. Running the company gives me a sense of purpose and fulfillment. It keeps me focused and motivated, and I take pride in the work I do. Every day, I strive to make the company better for the sake of our employees and their families. My role as CEO has become central to my identity, and I can't imagine giving it up. I don't even think about remarrying after the breakup. The idea of starting a new relationship doesn't appeal to me right now. I've been through too much emotional turmoil to even consider it. Instead, I want to focus on myself and my career. There's a lot I want to achieve, and I don't want any distractions. I've kept in touch with my father-in-law and get advice from him when needed. He's been a great support through all of this, and his experience and wisdom are invaluable. Whenever I face a difficult decision or need guidance, I can count on him to provide insightful advice. Our relationship has grown stronger, and I appreciate having him as a mentor. For now, I want to focus on the company and think of it as being married to it for the sake of my employees. My commitment to the company is like a marriage. It requires dedication, hard work, and passion. I want to ensure that the business continues to thrive, and that our employees have job security and a stable future. Their well-being is important to me, and I take my responsibilities as CEO very seriously. This journey has taught me a lot about resilience and the importance of staying true to oneself. Despite the personal challenges I've faced, I've managed to keep the company on a steady path and even achieve growth. It's not always easy, but knowing that I'm making a positive impact on people's lives keeps me going. In the end, my focus remains on leading the company and supporting my team. I'm determined to build a successful future for all of us. While my personal life has had its ups and downs, my professional life gives me stability and a sense of accomplishment. This is where I find my strength and motivation, and it's where I choose to direct my energy for the foreseeable future. My name is Julie, and I'm a 27-year-old woman, and recently I got a call from my mother. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. She called to ask for my help because my sister and her husband had just gone through something really bad. To give you some background, the man who is now my sister's husband was supposed to be my husband once upon a time. My sister, who's 23 and I'll call her Kelly, got together with my fiancé Jack, who is also 27, on the day of my engagement. Jack and I had been together since college, and after almost 3 years, he proposed to me. He even threw a party to surprise me on the night of our engagement. I remember feeling like I was on top of the world until about 2 p.m. that day. I decided to step out into the backyard to get better phone reception, and that's when I saw my sister and Jack. They were making out so passionately that it took them a few seconds to even notice me standing there, completely shocked. I couldn't believe he would do this to me, especially after almost 3 years together, and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally noticed me, they quickly pulled apart, but it was too late. I ran to my car and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel. I was in complete shock and trying to process what I had just seen, hoping it wasn't true. But then I received a text from Kelly, apologizing and saying she was in love with Jack. Apparently, this had been going on for a long time. I was in my hotel room when I got that text, and I broke down like never before. After that, Jack texted me too, saying pretty much the same thing. He told me that he had only proposed to me because he thought that if he committed to me, he could push Kelly out of his mind. Obviously, that didn't work, and it made him want Kelly even more. He said it wasn't about me, but it was about them, and they just knew they were meant to be together. I was just a stand-in, a way for Jack to eventually meet Kelly. I stayed at the hotel for a few days, trying to pull myself together. I was still feeling lost and trying to convince myself that this was just a bad joke life was playing on me. After almost 5 days, I finally went back home because I needed to get my things and go back to work if I didn't want to get fired. When I got home, I realized that my family had been staying with Jack, all under the same roof, waiting for me to return. It might have been touching if it weren't for the reason I left in the first place. Everyone had been trying to text me and get a response from me nonstop after I disappeared, but I hadn't answered a single one of those messages. So when I finally came back, there was a lot of chaos. Everyone made sure to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Kelly had the nerve to come up to me with tears in her eyes and give me a big hug when she saw me. I was too shocked to even react and just stood there silently while everyone crowded around me. Finally, when things calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was only back to get my things and move out for good. Jack had been standing there quietly until that point, but when I said I was leaving, he announced that I didn't need to go because he had already packed his stuff and was moving in with Kelly now that everything was out in the open. My family, including my parents, my aunt, and my dad's youngest sister, who has lived with us since her husband passed away, all had big smiles on their faces. There was nothing to smile about, at least not from my perspective. Kelly stood next to Jack, looking at me sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and asked my family what on earth they were smiling about because, as far as I could see, there was nothing to be happy about. I was upset because Kelly had just broken up my engagement and taken away my boyfriend of almost 3 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up and told me that they couldn't change the past, but they could accept the future. They believed that the future had Kelly and Jack together, and even though the relationship started with cheating, they felt sorry about it, but wanted me to understand that this was for the best. Kelly apologized for taking my boyfriend, saying she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished she had told me earlier, so I didn't have to find out this way, but she said they were deeply in love and wanted to spend their lives together. Then they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't something to be sentimental about. What they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family got annoyed with me and said I was being bratty instead of being happy for my sister. They thought I was making it all about myself and didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and told them all to get out of my house. I couldn't understand how they were defending Kelly and Jack while making me look like the bad guy, acting like I was overreacting. My father stepped in and told me not to act like a child because things like this happen and I should just accept it. He said I should be happy that my sister found her soulmate instead of being jealous. It felt like they were all acting crazy and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I said screw it, went into my room, packed some of my things, and left again without talking to them or listening to what they had to say, even as they called my name and told me not to go. I didn't have anything left to say to them because it was clear that they cared more about Kelly and her happiness than about me or what was right and wrong. They were so focused on justifying what Kelly had done that they completely forgot that I had real feelings too. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded because I didn't think I owed them anything. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Kelly and Jack's wedding, which I obviously declined. All the friends that Jack and I had in common also declined the wedding invitation to support me, and even a few relatives who knew the truth stopped interacting with my family after they learned how I had been treated. It's been 3 years, and I've cut them out of my life completely. They occasionally tried to get back in touch by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignored them. I never blocked any of them, though I did remove them from my friends list. Since I have a public account, they could still see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see that I was living a great life and let them feel jealous. It was a bit petty, but it was the least I could do after how they treated me. Until recently, I had no idea what they had been up to in the last few years. About 5 days ago, my mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered and realized it was her, I tried to hang up, but she begged me desperately for a chance to talk. She sounded so upset that I agreed to listen for a couple of minutes because I couldn't ignore her completely. She told me that Kelly and Jack had started a business a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were backing out because the business wasn't making any profit. They borrowed more money, but even that didn't help, and now they were deep in debt. Loan sharks were after them, and they were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. I lived a comfortable life and could afford to help them out, so my mother turned to me as a last resort, begging me to loan them money to pay off their debts. She wasn't asking for a small amount either. She wanted almost $95,000 to help Kelly and Jack. I asked why Kelly wasn't the one calling me if she needed help and why she was making our mother speak to me instead. My mother explained that Kelly and Jack didn't even know she was asking me for help because they had told her not to. I guess they all still remembered what happened 3 years ago. Kelly didn't want me to know about their situation and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anyone else who could give them that much money quickly. A couple of months had already passed, and Kelly and Jack were struggling even to put food on the table. My parents and Jack's family were helping as much as they could, but it wasn't enough. They had their own futures to think about, especially since most of my family, including Jack's parents, were retired. That's why my mother, with no other options, had called me to ask for help. I could afford to help them, but I really didn't want to. Kelly was right not to contact me for help because they lost the right to ask anything of me the day they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. She sounded very upset and told me I was being cruel and needed to think about my family. I reminded her that Kelly and Jack didn't think about me when they had their affair, and my family didn't think about me while they supported them. So I didn't see why I needed to think about them now. I had worked hard to get where I am today, and I wasn't going to just give away $95,000 to 2 people who didn't deserve it. My mother started crying on the phone, saying she never expected me to grow up to be so selfish, and claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I told my mother that it was unfortunate, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, she's been sending me text after text, almost every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister. She keeps saying that this isn't the time for petty revenge, and that Kelly is in serious trouble. She warns that if I don't help her now, I'll regret it in the future. My mother is acting desperate, and I don't know what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad person here either. Am I wrong for not helping my sister financially after she stole my fiancé 3 years ago? Update: I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because, first, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous, and second, because I thought cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret if something bad happened to them. But now, I don't care anymore. I should have removed them from my life 3 years ago. Keeping them around this long was the real petty thing I did. Refusing to help my sister now isn't petty. It's just the logical thing to do. They've already wasted so much money, and I'm sure that even if I gave them the money now, they wouldn't be able to pay it back. $95,000 is a huge amount, and even though I'm doing well financially, that doesn't mean I can just give away that kind of money without expecting it back. If it were a close friend I was helping, I would still expect to be repaid. But these are people who are close to me, and they're definitely not my loved ones. I can't expect them to pay me back, so there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I talked to a few of my friends about this to get their opinions, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them the money not out of revenge, but because it's completely impractical and foolish to expect me to help the very people who betrayed me in the past. Anyway, my mother is now blocked, and she can't contact me to guilt-trip me anymore. I have nothing to worry about, at least that's what I thought. Update 2. Hi everyone, something really big happened today. I was at work when I got a call from my neighbor. She told me there was a couple outside my house, screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor said they seemed pretty crazy and had been yelling at my door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but deep down, I already knew who it was. When she described them, it just confirmed my suspicion. It was Kelly and Jack. My neighbor insisted that I come back home to deal with them because she didn't think they were up to any good. Given that it was Kelly and Jack, I knew she was right. So I thanked her and immediately started driving back home because I couldn't risk them getting into my house. Luckily, I got there in about 20 minutes and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I tried to call the police right away, but Jack moved like lightning and knocked the phone out of my hand. Kelly walked over and said they were just there to talk, and they didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and made it clear that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside. Whatever they had to say would have to be discussed outside in the yard. They seemed okay with that, which was a relief because I didn't think it would be a good idea to let them inside. They already seemed pretty hostile, and I didn't know what to expect. Kelly started talking and told me that our mother had informed her about the phone call and how I had ignored the texts that followed and even blocked them all. She said that the way I was behaving was very unfair, and that since it had been 3 years, I should really be over it by now. I was accused of being silly and dramatic, just to get attention from my family. Kelly said she felt insulted because I refused to help them, and that's why she was there to talk to me. She mentioned that she had managed to arrange the money for now by selling their house and all their jewelry, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. She wanted to know that she could rely on me for help when that time came. I told her flat out that she couldn't and shouldn't count on me at all under any circumstances because I hated her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I warned her it was taking all my self-control not to hit her at that moment, so it would be best if they just left. Jack, shockingly, demanded that they wouldn't go anywhere until I signed a document promising to give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew that such a document wouldn't be legally valid if I was forced to sign it under pressure, and they had to be out of their minds if they thought they could manipulate me into something like that. I told both of them to get out, but Kelly pushed me and said that I had to help them because I owed it to them since we were family. She said I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was stunned that she actually pushed me, and I was tempted to slap her. But I held back because I knew that getting violent would only make things worse. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Jack knocked it out of my hand earlier, and I made a run for it. I quickly climbed into my car and drove off without even checking my rearview mirror. Luckily, I hadn't turned off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running, and I was able to get a head start on them. They didn't chase after me on foot, which was a relief but they stayed at my house, which was unfortunate. Once I was at a safe distance, I decided to call the police and report what was happening. I drove back to my house just in time, arriving shortly before the police got there. Within about 25 minutes, they showed up, and I filled them in on everything that had happened. The police arrested Kelly and Jack and took them away. I knew the charges weren't that serious and they'd probably get off easily, but it was still worth it because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to deal with them anymore. A few hours have passed since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange. I thought by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from a different number, but they haven't. I'm guessing they're either over everything and won't try to get under my skin again, or they're just waiting for the right time to contact me later when things have calmed down a bit. Update 3. Hi, so my last update was about a week ago, and I had started to believe that my family was finally going to leave me alone after I called the cops on Kelly and Jack. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from bothering me again. This time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking if they could talk to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed much less arrogant compared to Kelly and Jack, so I decided to let them in. As soon as my mother entered the house, she started crying and apologized for ever taking Kelly's side over mine. My father explained that after they learned Kelly and Jack were arrested because of their behavior, including physically pushing me, they couldn't see them the same way anymore. They had decided to cut them off. My mother kept crying the entire time she was there, while my father continued apologizing for siding with Kelly in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. I told my parents that while I appreciated them finally coming to their senses, it was too little, too late to make things better. I had grown used to living my life on my own terms and didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. As much as I appreciated their visit and apology, I couldn't promise to work on our relationship because, honestly, I didn't see any point in trying to salvage something that was already broken, even if it was with my parents. They protested a bit, saying that we could fix things if we really wanted to, but that was the problem I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself, free from the complications and hurt of the past. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done trying. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually, they left and asked if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I did unblock my parents, which feels a bit strange, but for now, that's where things stand. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm focusing on my own peace and well-being. Stay tuned for more updates on how things unfold. My name is Lauren, and I was my mom's first child. She had me when she was still figuring out her life. She got married young, right after high school, to my dad, Scott. They were more focused on love than on money, which didn't work out well for long. I was still just a little kid when she met Kyle, a guy with a lot of money and a fancy car. She left my dad, took me with her, and never looked back, except to collect the alimony checks. At first, Kyle seemed nice. He would bring me little treats and let me play in his big office filled with shiny things. But my mom changed around him. She always looked at me like I reminded her of a life she wanted to forget. One evening, I overheard them talking in the kitchen while I was supposed to be watching TV. "She's too much like Scott," my mom said sharply. "Always asking questions, always looking at me like he used to." I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but it hurt to hear her talk about me like I was a problem. I loved my real dad. Sure, he lived in a small apartment on the other side of the city, but every moment with him was fun, even if we were just playing in the park or eating cheap pizza. My mom's words from that night stuck with me, and she only became more critical over time. "Can't you do anything right?" she'd say whenever I tried to help around the house or did my schoolwork in the living room. My dad, on the other hand, was different. "You're doing great, Lauren," he'd tell me whenever I showed him my grades or a drawing from school. "Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Life at my mom and Kyle's house got more stressful when I started school. My mom was always talking about appearances, how I needed to wear the right clothes and hang out with the right kids. "Why can't you dress like Karen's daughter? Look at her," she'd say, showing me a picture from a party I wasn't invited to. One day, after she scolded me for tracking mud into the hallway, I finally snapped back. At least Dad doesn't yell about a bit of dirt. The slap came fast, her hand stinging my cheek before I knew it. I even saw it move. "Don't talk about your father like that," she hissed, her face close to mine, her breath smelling of coffee and anger. Tears started to fill my eyes, but I held them back, just like Dad taught me. That night, lying in my bed, I promised myself I wouldn't let her see me cry. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. When Mom announced she was pregnant again, the whole house felt different, like something big was about to change, and not in a good way. She had that glow people talk about when they're expecting, but it never seemed to shine in my direction. "I'm having a baby with the man I love, Kyle. It's going to be perfect," Mom said one evening, rubbing her belly while Kyle beamed like he'd won a prize. Kyle, always trying to charm, added, "We'll need to redo the guest room, make it fit for a little princess." My heart sank. They were talking about my room, my little corner in their world. "What about my room?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom shot me a look, her smile turning tight. "You can move into the smaller room, Lauren. It's only fair. The baby will need the space." The way she said fair made it sound like it was already decided, no room for arguing. So I moved, packed up my things, and settled into the smallest room in the house, barely bigger than a closet. Time flew by, and soon Mary was born. She was all anyone could talk about. "Isn't she just the most beautiful baby you've ever seen?" Mom would gush to her friends over the phone, cradling Mary like she was the most precious thing in the world. "Yeah, she's cute," I'd mutter, trying to join the conversation. Cute was an understatement. Mary was adorable, and I couldn't help but love her from the moment I saw her. I wanted to be a good big sister, to be involved and help out. One afternoon, I tried to sneak into Mary's room while Mom was busy in the kitchen. I tiptoed in, peering over the crib at my baby sister, who was gurgling happily. "Hey there, Mary," I whispered, reaching out a finger for her to grab. But Mom must have heard me, because suddenly she was at the door, her voice sharp as a knife. "What are you doing, Lauren? I told you to ask before going into her room." "I just wanted to see her," I protested, feeling the familiar sting of tears pricking my eyes. I wanted to help, but Dad was different. During one of my weekends with him, I'd opened up while we were having pizza at our favorite spot. "Mom's always on edge when I'm around Mary. It's like she thinks I'll break her or something," I said. Dad chewed thoughtfully before replying, "You know, Lauren, some people just have a hard time sharing love. It's like they think there's only so much to go around. But remember, you've got a big heart. Don't let your mom's behavior make you think otherwise." His words helped a little, but back at Mom's house, the distance between us kept growing. Even when I tried to share stories about school or friends, Mom's attention was always split, half listening and half watching Mary. One day, I came home with a school award, second place in the science fair. I was so excited, clutching the certificate like it was a ticket to their approval. "Look, Mom, I won this," I exclaimed, holding it out to her as she fed Mary. "That's nice, dear," she said without looking up. "Put it on the fridge or something." "Or something," I echoed to myself, the words feeling empty. I stuck the certificate on the fridge, a bit crooked, and stepped back. To them, it was just another piece of paper, just another day in Mary's shadow. By the time I reached high school, things were pretty rough at home. Between Mom's cold shoulders and Kyle's indifference, I felt more like a guest than a part of the family. It was around then that the bomb-dropped Mom decided it was time for me to live with Dad permanently. The day she told me we were having dinner, it was one of those rare moments where it was just her and me at the table. Kyle was late from work, and Mary was already tucked in. "Lauren, we need to talk about your future," Mom started, pushing her food around her plate with a fork. There was no warmth in her voice, just a cold, businesslike tone that immediately made me nervous. "What about it?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my heart was racing. "We've been discussing things, and we think it's best if you move in with your father. With the new baby coming, things here are, well, they're complicated." I almost choked on my water. Move in with Dad. But why? I thought everything was fine here. Mom sighed, a sound full of impatience. "Look, Lauren, you're not a child anymore. You need your own space, and we can't provide that here, not with the new situation. It's cramped, and frankly, the financial burden is more than we expected. It's better for everyone this way." I pushed my plate away, no longer hungry. "And what about school? My friends?" "You can go to a new school, make new friends," she said, as if it were that simple, as if my life could be easily replaced. It felt like I had to erase my life and start over without any trouble. The next few weeks were a blur as I packed up my things, my whole world shrinking into boxes, books, clothes, and the few keepsakes that meant something to me. Kyle barely said goodbye, and Mary, too young to understand, gave me a confused hug. Moving day was tough. Dad lived on the other side of town in a small apartment. It was clean but cluttered with memories of a life paused since Mom left him. He was standing there waiting for me with open arms and a worried smile when I arrived. The apartment was nothing like the house I grew up in. My new room was half the size of my old one, with walls that needed paint and a window that looked out at a brick wall. But it was quiet, and Dad was trying his best to make it feel like home. The first day of the new school was rough. As I walked down the crowded hallways, I could feel the stares and hear the whispers. "That's the new girl," they'd say, as if I were some kind of oddity. In class, I kept to myself, doodling in my notebook and trying to block out the murmurs. When the bell rang, I was the first one out the door, not wanting to linger. At home, Dad noticed my mood. "How was school?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. "It was fine," I lied, shrugging off my coat and dropping my bag by the door. "If it gets tough, you tell me, okay? We're in this together. You're not alone, Lauren." His words meant a lot, but the loneliness I felt was deep and gnawing. It wasn't just about missing my old friends or the big house. It was about feeling unwanted, like I was pushed out because I was too much of a burden. Adjusting to life at Dad's wasn't easy, but I quickly realized that if I didn't pull myself together, things would only get worse. One morning, I woke up, looked around my cramped room, and decided it was time to take charge of my life. "No one else is going to do it for me," I muttered under my breath. Dad noticed the change in me almost immediately. Over breakfast one day, he looked up from his coffee and said, "You're looking more determined these days, Lauren. What's on your mind?" I stirred my cereal, thinking about how to put it into words. "I want to make something of myself, Dad. I don't want to end up stuck, you know." He nodded, a serious look crossing his face. "I hear you, kiddo. So what's the plan?" "That scholarship, the big one for the top students, I'm going to get it," I declared, more to convince myself than him. Dad's smile was all the encouragement I needed. I needed that scholarship, and if anyone could get it, it was me. Dad said, "Just tell me what you need from me." School was tough, with long hours spent catching up and even longer evenings buried in books. My teachers noticed the change. Even the tough ones seemed to respect how hard I was working. Mr. Jeremy, my math teacher, kept me after class one day. "Lauren, your work has improved a lot." "What's driving this?" he asked. "I need that scholarship," I replied bluntly, packing up my stuff. "I've got plans, and they don't include being stuck here forever." Mr. Jeremy studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, keep at it, and let me know if you need extra help. I'm here." Making friends wasn't easy, but I managed to find a few people who didn't mind that I was focused on my goals. During lunch, I'd sit with Linda and Peter, two kids who weren't exactly popular but knew how to laugh. So, Lauren, you're like a library ninja now, huh? Peter joked one day, nudging me as we sat down with our trays. I cracked a smile. Yeah, got to be stealthy if I want to snag the best study spots. Linda chimed in, her voice soft but sincere. It's cool what you're doing, Lauren. Most wouldn't bother. Days turned into months, and the pressure grew as the application deadlines got closer. Dad was my rock, always there with a hot meal and a listening ear whenever the stress became too much. The day I got the scholarship letter, my hands were shaking as I tore it open. Dad was right there, holding his breath. I scanned the words, my heart pounding, and then I cheered so loud the neighbors probably heard. I got it, Dad. I got it. I jumped up, the letter flapping in my hand like a flag of victory. Dad swept me up in a big hug, laughing and cheering right along with me. I knew it. I knew you could do it. As I packed up my things for college a few months later, I felt ready. The future was bright, and for the first time, it felt like it was truly mine. I was leaving, but I was taking all these lessons, all this love and hard-earned wisdom with me. After graduating with honors and establishing a solid career, I finally felt like I was on stable ground. I was 25, doing well at my job, and had just started dating a great guy from work named Eric, who had been nothing but supportive. Then, out of the blue, my mom called. We hadn't spoken much since I moved out, but suddenly here she was asking more like telling me something. Lauren, your sister Mary is going to college in your city. We've paid her tuition, and we think it'd be best if she stayed with you. Mom said, making it clear this wasn't just a suggestion. I hesitated, memories of our strained relationship running through my mind, but I wanted to believe things could be different this time. Okay, Mom, I'll help Mary out. It might be nice to reconnect, I said, trying to keep any doubts out of my voice. Mary moved in 2 weeks later, and it was obvious right away that we were very different. She was as stunning as ever, completely focused on her looks and living a high-maintenance lifestyle. She brought with her a suitcase full of expectations and a personality that expected them to be met. Can you make sure we have almond milk and kale? I'm on a special diet, Mary said casually on her first evening, checking herself out in the mirror. Sure, I'll add them to the grocery list, I replied, trying to be accommodating. But living with Mary turned out to be harder than I expected. She partied like there was no tomorrow, often coming home at dawn, her carefree laughter echoing through the apartment while I lay awake, worrying about work meetings and presentations. One afternoon, Eric came over while Mary was getting ready for another night out. I noticed how she smiled at him just a bit too sweetly, and for a bit too long. After she left, Eric spoke up. Lauren, I think Mary's got the wrong idea about me. She's been, flirty. I felt a wave of anger and embarrassment. Thanks for telling me, Eric. I'll talk to her. When I confronted Mary, she just laughed it off. Oh, come on, Lauren, I'm just being friendly. Besides, can I help it if he likes me back? That's my fiancé, Mary. You need to respect that, I replied, my voice firm. Her laugh turned cold. Lauren, I'm used to getting what I want. I always have. That was the last straw. I couldn't live like this, feeling like I had to guard my life for my own sister. You need to find another place to live, Mary. This isn't working out, I said, making it clear that I meant it. I told her my decision was final, and Mary stormed out, slamming the door behind her. Within an hour, my phone rang. It was Mom, and her voice was cold and sharp. You're such a jealous girl, Lauren. You can't stand to see your sister happy, can you? I just want respect, Mom, that's all, I replied, but it was like talking to a wall. After that, things went quiet between Mary and me. I heard through the grapevine that she dropped out of college and was drifting through her social circles on charm and whims. As for me, I refocused on my life with Eric, my work, and rebuilding my boundaries. 3 years flew by since I last tried to patch things up with my family. Things were going well for me, I was moving up at work, and life with Eric was better than ever. That's when I heard the news about Mary. She had dropped out of college and was getting married to some rich guy she'd met. Feeling a mix of curiosity and goodwill, I picked up the phone to call home and offer my congratulations. Mom answered, her voice cold and distant as always. "Mom, I heard about Mary's wedding. I just wanted to say congratulations," I started, trying to keep my tone light. "Well, don't bother. We're not waiting for you at the wedding. It's for rich people only, and we don't need any beggars there," she spat out, her words cutting deep. I clenched the phone a little tighter, feeling the old sting of rejection. "Really, Mom, that's how you're going to be?" "What did you expect, Lauren? You've always been the difficult one. Just stay away," she said before hanging up. I stood there, phone in hand, the dial tone echoing in my ear. The hurt was real, but I wasn't going to let it ruin me. I found out later that they'd spared no expense on Mary's wedding, hiring popular artists and actors to make it a lavish affair. Time passed, and life didn't stand still for me either. Eric proposed, and suddenly I was planning my own wedding, nothing extravagant, but every bit filled with love and sincerity. I called Dad to share the news. He was overjoyed. "Lauren, that's wonderful. You bet I'll be there. I wouldn't miss it for the world," he said, his voice brimming with happiness. Encouraged by Dad's reaction, I made one last attempt to bridge the gap with my mom. I dialed her number, my heart racing as I waited for her to pick up. "Mom, I'm getting married. I want you to come," I said, holding my breath. Her reply was as cold as a winter breeze. "No, Lauren, not interested in attending some modest gathering of losers. Count me out." I swallowed hard, fighting back the hurt. "All right, Mom, take care," I said and hung up, knowing it was probably the last time I'd invite her into my life. Our wedding day was simple but beautiful. Dad walked me down the aisle, his presence a steady comfort. The room was filled with genuine smiles and heartfelt congratulations, a stark contrast to the grandeur and coldness of Mary's wedding spectacle. Our modest reception was filled with laughter, dancing, and stories. Eric and I mingled with friends and family who loved us for who we were, not for money or status. Life was going well, and Eric and I were thrilled to be expecting our first child. Then one ordinary afternoon, my phone rang, and the voice on the other end turned my day upside down. It was Mom, and she wasn't calling to congratulate me. "Lauren, you have to take us in. We're desperate," she blurted out without even a hello. "Mom, what's going on?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "It's all gone wrong. Kyle's business failed. We mortgaged the house for Mary's wedding, and now it's all just gone. And your sister's marriage is over. Her husband kicked her out and is demanding money for her cheating," she explained hurriedly, her voice edged with panic. I took a deep breath, trying to process the flood of information. "Okay, slow down. What exactly are you asking of me?" "We need a place to stay, all of us. We're coming to your house," she stated matter-of-factly, as if it were the most obvious solution. The request, or rather the demand, hit me hard. "No, Mom, you can't just decide to move in with us. It doesn't work like that." "Lauren, you owe us after everything we've done for you," she snapped, her voice sharp and commanding. That struck a nerve. "Oh, you, Mom? Remember how you were when I needed you most? You pushed me out. You chose everything over me. And now you expect me to just open my doors." Her voice rose. "You're being selfish, Lauren. Where is your family spirit? I am your mother. And you've never let me forget it. But being a mother doesn't mean what you think it does. It's not about debts and demands," I shot back, my patience wearing thin. Her fury was palpable even through the phone. "You'll regret this, Lauren. I might even take you to court to get what I deserve." I couldn't help but laugh, but it was more from disbelief than anything else. "Go ahead and try, Mom. Remember, Dad was my guardian when you kicked me out. What are you going to claim? That your daughter wouldn't let you live off her after you threw her out?" There was a pause, and I could almost hear her thinking. "This isn't over, Lauren," she finally hissed before hanging up. Life after that last call with Mom felt like a fresh start, a real new beginning. Eric and I were busy getting the nursery ready, picking out paint colors, assembling the crib, and navigating the usual ups and downs of pregnancy. It was a bright and early Friday morning, and I was setting up some baby clothes we had just bought, folding them neatly into the new dresser. Eric was drilling something in the corner, the electric screwdriver buzzing away. He stopped, wiped his forehead, and looked over at me with a smile. "How's it going over there, Lauren? Need any help?" "I've got it, thanks. Just thinking about everything. It's really happening, huh?" I responded, running my hand over a tiny soft onesie. "It really is. We're going to be parents, Lauren," he said, his voice full of awe and a bit of nervous excitement. Just then, there was a knock at the door. I was surprised. Who could it be this early on a Friday? Eric went to answer it while I continued organizing. I heard voices, and then Eric called out, "Lauren, it's for you." Walking into the living room, I was surprised to see my dad standing there with a big grin on his face and a teddy bear in hand. "Surprise!" he exclaimed. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I couldn't hide my delight as I rushed over to give him a big hug. "I wanted to come and see how my favorite daughter is doing, and I brought something for my future grandchild." He handed me the teddy bear, which was soft and cuddly. "Thank you, Dad. It means the world to me that you're here," I said, feeling a bit emotional. We sat down, and Dad looked around at the half-assembled baby furniture and the stacks of baby books. "Looks like you're almost ready for the little one." "We're trying. It's a lot, but we're excited," I told him, then paused, biting my lip. "Dad, I had another call with Mom. It didn't go well." Dad's expression turned serious. "I heard about it from your mom. She wasn't too pleased, was she?" "No, she wasn't. But Dad," I stood my ground. "I had to for me, for Eric, and for the baby. We need peace here," I said firmly. The day passed with us sharing stories, Dad giving us some unsolicited but funny parenting advice, and just enjoying being together. It was a good day, one of those days you know you'll look back on fondly. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Eric, Dad, and I sat on the porch, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Eric put his arm around me, and I leaned into him. Despite everything with Mom and all the drama, I feel lucky. We have each other, and we're about to start this amazing new chapter. "I have a feeling it's going to be great," I said, looking out at the fading light. Eric kissed the top of my head. "It will be. We've got this, Lauren." As night fell and Dad said his goodbyes, I felt a deep sense of contentment and readiness for what was to come. The challenges with my mom and the uncertainty of new beginnings had been tough, but they led me here, to this moment, surrounded by love and support. My name is Kelly Brooke, and I'm 43 years old. I don't have any kids from my second marriage. My husband is a kind man who never misses our monthly dates, no matter how busy he gets. He always keeps his promises. I know I shouldn't compare him to my first husband, but I've never regretted my divorce, and I've never regretted getting remarried. This month is our 8th wedding anniversary. My husband reserved a table at a fancy restaurant with a view of the sea. I thought we were going to have a wonderful time, but then I ran into the last person I wanted to see, Jeremy Clarkson, my ex-husband from 13 years ago. We were about to leave the restaurant after finishing our meal when my husband excused himself to go to the restroom. I was admiring the ocean view from the window, thinking about the beautiful moments my husband and I had spent looking at the sea together. Just then, I heard someone call my name. When I turned around, I saw Jeremy. "Hey, what's so beautiful? Do you think a regular ocean looks nice to someone like you, who's basically broke?" "Jeremy, long time no see. Why are you here?" "Why am I here? I should be asking you that," Jeremy said, sitting down in the chair my husband had been using, looking at me as if I was a joke. I put up with those eyes for a whole decade of our marriage. I never thought I'd run into you here. Can someone like you, who doesn't have much money, Really eat at a fancy place like this? Can you even afford it? Or is this a once-in-a-lifetime thing? It's our wedding anniversary. Ah, I see. Poor people can only come to places like this on anniversaries, huh? I come here often, you know. You're still pathetic. Isn't there someone with you? Yeah, there is. I just sent her to pay. You know, handling money is a woman's job. I thought to myself that he was still the same, always belittling women. Then I saw her his lover from 13 years ago. She had aged quite a bit. Her beauty was half of what it used to be, and she looked worn out from life. I guess Jeremy has been living the good life while his wife suffers. You're still wearing shabby clothes, aren't you? Aren't you embarrassed to dress so poorly? Talking to such a terrible man like him makes me feel sick. I turned my eyes toward the restroom, hoping my husband would return soon, and there he was. He had been watching us for a while as I was talking to another man. Seeing the confusion on my face, he approached us. Excuse me, do you need something from my wife? Your wife? This woman is your wife. Yes, what do you need? You also look poor. I guess poor women always remarry poor men. Please don't be rude. My husband is a very respectable man. Jeremy snorted in disapproval at my response. Imph, you must be just a useless broke man then. He glared at my husband. I thought to myself, this man really hasn't changed at all. Jeremy was always very selfish. Although he worked for a big company, it was unclear if he was really good at his job. He was good at sucking up to his boss, though. He blamed his mistakes on his juniors and loudly claimed their achievements were because of his guidance. How he managed to climb the corporate ladder is beyond me, but by the time we divorced, he had become a manager. Jeremy always claimed he was an elite employee, but I never thought of him that way. I graduated from a prestigious university, Jeremy would always brag. Not just any university, but one of those special ones. When I was dating him, I believed his exaggerated stories and thought he was really smart. But when we got married, I discovered that was his only real talent. Plus, he constantly put me down, even though I only completed high school. Your parents were too poor to send you to university, right? But it's good for you. You didn't have the brains for it anyway. If your family had been rich, you would have had to go to university. But it would have been impossible for someone as stupid as you. My family wasn't poor. I just wanted to start working sooner rather than going to college. Ah, enough with the excuses. You can't stop making excuses, can you? You're an incompetent woman after all. But it's good for women, isn't it? Even if they're incompetent or stupid, as long as they have good looks, they can get by. If they catch a competent man, they can live well. I never thought he would say such things before we got married, so his change after marriage was shocking. Plus, his parents weren't wealthy landowners. His father was just a director, yet he still looked down on anyone he thought was poor. You really can't do anything right. You're bad at cooking, you can't clean, and you can't even have kids. Marrying you was a huge mistake, he would say. It wasn't a physical issue that stopped me from having kids. It was the stress caused by Jeremy. My family always valued being careful with money and appreciating what we had. But when I cooked with radish leaves to save money, he yelled, "Are you trying to feed me trash?" and threw them in the garbage. It made me realize just how different we were. One day, he told me he had a lover. The woman was much younger than he was. He pushed for a divorce, saying it was better for him to remarry a younger woman. I was glad to divorce such a man, so I signed the papers. "Who is this man, Kelly?" my husband asked. "He's my ex-husband, Jeremy Clarkson." "Oh, I see." I had already told my husband about everything Jeremy had said and done to me. It had been a painful 13 years, and I had shared it all with tears. My husband just listened quietly and finally said, "Let's be happy from now on." "You really dared to marry a woman like her? Since you're marrying someone from a poor family, you must be broke too," Jeremy sneered. "Well, maybe not. Of course you are. So you're also a broke man, huh? Marrying a poor person means you're broke too, am I right? But why did you divorce such a wonderful person? Wonderful? Your eyes must be fooling you. Truly wonderful means having a beautiful wife like mine. He pointed to his wife, who stood there looking embarrassed. Is that woman your wife? Yes, she's beautiful, isn't she? She's actually my boss's daughter. Marrying the boss's daughter definitely helps one climb the career ladder faster. Marrying a broke woman like you probably means you're just a regular employee. Too bad. A regular employee? I haven't heard that in years, I said. What are you trying to prove? A low-class guy marrying a low-class woman? It just means you'll both be broke for the rest of your lives. And you think you deserve to eat in a fancy restaurant like this. This level of restaurant isn't a problem for us, my husband calmly replied. Yeah, sure, if that's what you think, Jeremy scoffed. Just then, a waiter passed by, and my husband pulled out a black card, instructing him to settle the bill. Jeremy was surprised by the card, but tried to hide it, snorting again. Is that a black card? Showing off a card like that here? You're not used to it, are you? You must have borrowed it from someone. Flashing the card around, but later you'll have to pay back the person who lent it to you, right? I bet you're scared to spend money in a place like this. It's all just an act. Funny thing to say. Who would lend their card, I wonder? No matter how naive someone is. They wouldn't lend out a card like this, my husband replied. How would you know that, Jeremy? You shouldn't say such insulting things, I added. What's insulting? I'm just stating the truth. There's no way you could be wealthy if you married a poor woman like her. My wife is poor, you say? Yes, that's right. Her family's place is a rundown, one-floor home. You know that, right? Or maybe you were too embarrassed to visit her home, so you went to a family restaurant instead. Meeting her parents at a family restaurant for a marriage proposal is unheard of, but for poor people like you, it's probably normal. A family restaurant, huh? The fact that you thought of that means you must have done it yourself, right? If you hadn't experienced it, you wouldn't have thought of it. What are you talking about? I'm not short on money. I wouldn't do something so cheap. Yet you came up with it. I never would have thought of that, my husband said, then turned to me. Right, Kelly? What about you? Well, I think I'd like to go to a family restaurant occasionally, but we rarely get the chance, I replied. Exactly, you're lying. When you were with me, you were happy to go to family restaurants. That's because I had never really been to one before. Oh, I bet. You sure talk big now, coming to a fancy restaurant like this, acting all important. Maybe that's you. It seems like you don't fit in this kind of place. What? You think I don't fit in here? There's no way I'm out of place. You're the one who doesn't belong here. Do you even know who I am? Why would I know you? If you want me to remember you, just become famous, my husband replied calmly. I am well known, but I guess it's impossible for someone like you to know me. You think I'm just a regular employee? I'm a manager, not just an employee. A manager, huh? Is that supposed to be impressive? Just then, the chauffeur arrived, greeted my husband politely, and said, Sir, your car is ready. Thank you. Jeremy looked confused. What's going on? Oh, you're probably just the president of some small company. I work for a major corporation, the Brook Group, and I'm a manager there. Oh, so you're still just a manager. Excuse me, you think you're important, but staying as a manager at your age won't get you far. What? This man works at our company? Yes, he's been with us for a long time. What do you mean our company? You're just an office lady from a small business. That's right, but I don't have kids or any reason to quit my job. So you can't have kids? I knew it. Something's wrong with you. Hey, that's crossing the line. Kelly is perfectly fine, my husband said, standing up for me. If she's fine, why can't she get pregnant? Women are supposed to have kids. I don't need to explain that to you. You can't say it because it would prove something's wrong with her. This man is hopeless, Jeremy said. Yes, he's beyond saving, my husband replied calmly. This man's name is Jeremy Clarkson, right? I understand, he's fired. Kelly, please contact HR. What? What are you saying? You think you can shock me with that? What company's president are you claiming to be? Are you trying to fool me with this obvious act? Are you stupid? Jeremy, my husband, is the president of the Brook Group. What? That can't be true. Jeremy exclaimed, but the driver nodded with a look of pity. Seriously? Is he really our president? Yes, and I am his wife and the vice president of our company. That's ridiculous. How could Kelly from a poor family end up as vice president with just a high school diploma? Those things don't matter. Whether someone graduated from high school or college doesn't determine their worth. That's ridiculous, Jeremy stammered. I will never forgive anyone who insults my wife, my husband said firmly. But there's a union. The union will protect us employees. You're a manager, right? Managers are not union members, so you are not protected by the union. Didn't you know that? Seriously. Well, you better prepare yourself. Since you insulted my wife, you must face the consequences. Jeremy looked stunned, but my husband didn't care and asked me if we should go. We left the table. That night, perhaps bothered by what happened, Jeremy called, but his tone was completely different from his arrogance earlier. Kelly, it's been a while. What do you mean? We already talked this afternoon, Jeremy. Ah yes, what can I do for you? Your dismissal hasn't been processed yet. Ah, you guys were just joking, right? About you being the vice president and your husband being the president? No, it's all true. I'm surprised you don't know who your own company's president and vice president are. But why would you be the vice president? Because the best way I can support my husband is by being in that position. But it's strange. Why would a high school graduate be the vice president? It's not strange at all. I only graduated high school because I wanted to start working early. But after we separated, I earned a college degree. Huh, really? Yes, there are schools you can attend from home. So you really are the president's wife? Yes. How did you manage to marry the president? When did you get married? We got married after I divorced you. I met the president soon after, and we dated for about 5 years before getting married. Married? Why would the president take an interest in someone like you? Stop being so rude. Oh, sorry. Connections are strange, aren't they? I just happened to meet the president. But even so, why would he marry someone broke like you? Is he a philanthropist? No one marries for charity. If he's not a philanthropist, did he marry you to make you his slave? Maybe today you got lucky and got taken to a fancy restaurant, but usually you must be having plain meals and living a difficult life where you can't even buy what you like, right? Why would you think that? That's not true at all. You're the only one who would do such a thing. There's no way you could marry such a rich man. Why do you think so? Rich people have connections with politicians and other wealthy people. If a poorly raised woman like you shows up at their parties, it would embarrass the president. Or maybe he lets his mistress attend those instead. You're making wild assumptions. If you keep looking down on me like this, you'll truly regret it. I'm just concerned for you. A woman with a poor upbringing like you marrying a rich man like the president will only suffer. A regular employee's husband would suit you better. Marrying someone richer than me, you must be a foolish woman who can't see ahead. Who's the fool here? If you called just to say that, I'm hanging up. No, wait, I'm not trying to insult you. It's just true that you come from poverty, and that can't be helped. Thinking I'm looking down on you for that is completely wrong. You say I come from a poor family, but my father is wealthy. Your family is poorer than mine. I didn't mention it back then because of your pride, but your family home isn't even half the size of mine. Your father is just a department head, and you're still just a manager. That's not true. When I proposed to you, you were living in a small single-story house. That was because we were renovating our home at the time. We had stored all our belongings elsewhere, and it was just a temporary residence. There was no need to move to a big house. My mother said so. That can't be true. You don't have to believe it, but since the renovation is finished, even if you say you want to visit my parents' home, you've stubbornly refused to go again. I couldn't tell you the truth. Who would want to visit such a poor, run-down house? You really are hopeless. Then I'll send you a picture. This is my family home, you'll see from the picture. I sent a photo of a large mansion. That's my house. I lived there for a while after our divorce. What? That can't be true. It's true. If this is true, then why were you working as an office lady in a small company? If you're so rich, you wouldn't need to work. And if you did work, wouldn't it be at a large corporation? My father is the president of a major company. That company was a new one he started. When it was time to decide who would be the president, my brother was chosen for the role, so I volunteered to handle the administrative work. Now, that company has grown to the top of the industry. Is that true? Were you really so rich? Yes, this is the truth. This is the real me, the person you used to look down on. So that's why you could marry the president? That's not it. I met the president because we shared the same hobbies. We met through our interests and hit it off. He didn't know I was from a wealthy family, and I didn't know he was the president. So you're at the company where I work because of that. How long have you been at that company? I joined right after our divorce. I had a connection by chance. Why? When you were with me, you were just a clerk at your brother's company. After we divorced, you changed jobs. That's right. My brother's company grew a lot, and he told me it was time to do what I love. So I decided to pursue what I always wanted to do. Then, just as a senior position became vacant, they offered me the job. But at that stage, I still had no connection with the president. He was still someone high up, out of reach. I don't understand. How can you have connections like that? Do rich people just connect with other rich people? That's why I'm saying those things don't matter. It's your mindset that's holding you back as just a manager. I wonder why your wife hasn't gotten tired of you yet. She can't get tired of me. I'm supporting her. Keep up with that attitude, and you'll get what's coming to you. Anyway, that's the situation, so stop belittling me already. I wasn't trying to belittle you. I really thought you were poor. About that dismissal you mentioned this afternoon. Oh yes, your dismissal. After all the mocking you did, it's only natural you'd be fired. That would put me in a tough spot. Can you talk to the president so I don't get fired? What? You were just mocking me a lot, and now you're asking not to be dismissed? That's impossible. You know I have nothing but resentment towards you. Why? The fact that you don't think you're resented is truly surprising. What have I done to you? There's too much to even remember. It's that much. I bet your wife thinks the same as me. Why don't you ask her what she really thinks? Though I doubt she'll tell you. I only said those things because I thought you were poor. Why do you think I'm mocking you when I'm just being honest? Once words are spoken, they can't be taken back. You should understand that as an adult. I do understand that. Then you should understand why you're being dismissed, right? No, I don't understand at all. Please, I'll be in trouble if I'm fired. If it were just about this afternoon, the president might have overlooked it, but then you had to call and ask all these questions. My husband is here now, frowning. He really thinks you're hopeless. Maybe you should just give up. There's no saving you. No, if the president is right there, why can't you just say something? It's only natural for a husband and wife to be together. Besides, you didn't ask if someone was with me, did you? That's true, but you've made things worse for yourself. You mocked not just me, but my parents and my husband too. Look, I didn't think you'd get this angry. Please forgive me. If I had known you were wealthy, I wouldn't have said such mocking things. I won't say them again. Please forgive me. Just give up. I think your dismissal order will come down tomorrow. Wait, please, Jeremy's voice echoed on the other end of the phone, but I hung up and looked at my husband. The next day, Jeremy came to the president's office, looking pale with dark circles under his eyes. He seemed to be in really bad shape. I was in a meeting with my husband, the president, discussing business matters, but I was shocked by Jeremy's appearance. Jeremy, what's wrong? I'm very sorry, Jeremy apologized as he sat down on the spot. Jeremy, what are you doing? Please, please just don't fire me. What do you mean? My husband, the president, knew about the conversation from the previous day. He had guessed from my responses during the call, and I had told him everything Jeremy said after hanging up. As a result, his impression of Jeremy was very poor, and his anger was even greater than mine. I am truly sorry. I didn't know your wife was from a wealthy family. I think she is a perfect match for the president's wife. I also heard she graduated from university, even if it was through correspondence. She's a hard worker, unlike my own wife. So you decided she wasn't good enough for you and got rid of her, right? Jeremy looked up at the president, wondering how he knew such a thing. Of course, I've told my husband everything. We're married after all. Or do you and your wife not talk about your pasts? No, it's not like that, but that was a long time ago. I was young then. I thought Kelly was just a poor man's daughter, so I thought it was okay to have a mistress. How does it come to that? Is that why you think it's okay to commit sexual harassment or abuse your power? What do you mean? Don't tell me you haven't done it. There are complaints from your female coworkers. They say if our company doesn't handle it, they'll go to the police. Our company was just discussing what to do about it when your disrespectful remarks came yesterday. It's really hopeless, isn't it? That's right. I wouldn't have thought you were actually harassing or bullying, but after seeing you yesterday, it seems all too true. You don't even see women as people, do you? You think they're below you. No, I never. Even if that were true, firing me would be too harsh. Please show some mercy. Well, you do have a family. If you were fired, you wouldn't be the only one in trouble. That's right, exactly. My husband smirked and looked at me. So what do you think, Kelly? How about sending Jeremy to our Michigan? Wait, what? The Michigan is in a region with very few people and is practically unsustainable as a company. The former president, who came from that town, established the branch there to help the local people, but it's a lonely place with just one employee. The previous employee reportedly went mad from the loneliness. We want you to turn that branch around in 5 years. If you can do that, we'll bring you back here. Of course, if you can't, you'll spend your retirement in Michigan. Thank you, I appreciate it, Jeremy said, thinking it was an act of mercy from the president. He set off for the Michigan, but both my husband and I knew it was an impossible task. Working alone for a small number of town residents, it was clear there wouldn't be any profit to be made. Jeremy moved to the branch all motivated, taking his mistress, who had become his wife, with him. But she soon grew unhappy with the cold and isolation, and eventually she reached her limit. Jeremy's salary dropped significantly, and despite being called the branch manager, his pay was minimal. This led to daily arguments with his wife. Although he boasted that if he turned things around in 5 years, he could return to the head office, his city-bred wife didn't believe him. She left divorce papers behind and went back to the city. Jeremy tried his best for a year, but no matter how hard he worked, the population didn't grow, and no profits came. Eventually, he realized that no effort would change anything. In 2 days, he submitted his resignation. After leaving the company, Jeremy contacted his wife, but by then, she had found someone new. Not only was Jeremy ignored by her, but he was also beaten up by her new partner and ended up in the hospital. After being discharged, Jeremy looked for a job, but at his age, he found nothing and life became harder for him. He ended up living in a shabby, run-down apartment, and the only job he could find was as a nighttime store clerk. The man who had once boasted of graduating from a prestigious university now stood alone in a store at night. As for me, I continued to be cared for by my kind husband, enjoying another wonderful date this month. Marrying him changed my life so much, and I'm grateful that Jeremy and I divorced. I don't need such an expensive child, Simon said cruelly to his son, who was trying his best to stay strong despite his illness. Rachel, standing next to Simon, burst out laughing. Seeing their terrible behavior, I decided to cut ties with them for good. If you too feel that way, I, as his grandmother, will adopt him, I declared. Feel free to do so, Rachel said carelessly. It's not like he has much time left anyway. Just don't come back to us asking for money when it's time for his funeral, okay? She laughed loudly after saying this. Hearing these heartless words made me furious. From now on, we're strangers. Never contact me again, got it? Goodbye, I said firmly. I had been told something important about my grandson Maxime's condition by the doctor, but I chose to cut ties without telling my son and his wife. When they find out, I'm sure they will deeply regret their actions. As I gently hugged my grandson Maxime, I felt certain they would regret what they had done. My name is Camille. I'm 63 years old and a housewife. My husband passed away 7 years ago, and now I live alone. It was lonely at first, but I've gotten used to it. With my husband's inheritance, my retirement fund, and my pension, I can live a comfortable and peaceful life. I have a son named Simon. He's 33 and still hasn't settled down. Even though he's at the ideal age for marriage, he doesn't have a steady job and lives a carefree life. After graduating from college, he got a job but quit after 3 months because he didn't get along with his boss. He has had jobs on and off, but none of them lasted. My husband and I sometimes had to pay off Simon's debts. When my husband was alive, he often lectured Simon about his lifestyle. After my husband passed away, Simon rarely visited. In my husband's will, Simon only received a small inheritance, which might be why he was upset. I haven't kept in touch with him since. I supported Simon mentally and financially until he graduated from college. But I feel responsible for the fact that he has grown up to be so careless. I thought I had done enough for Simon until he became an adult and started his own life. I believed I didn't need to help him much after that. However, one day, out of nowhere, Simon came back home without any warning. It had been 2 years since we last saw each other, and he looked different, tired, and worn out. His style had changed too. He was wearing an aloha shirt, which stood out in our small town surrounded by farmlands. "Hey, I got married," he said. I was caught off guard by his news, and I was left in a state of shock and confusion. Seeing my surprised face, Simon clicked his tongue and called out to someone in his car. "Hey, it's okay now. Come over here." "I'm coming," a woman replied in a high-pitched voice. She stepped out of the car, dressed in a way that was hard to ignore and looked out of place. To my surprise, a small child toddled along behind her. A child? What is going on? I thought. Look, the kid is too young for us to work properly, and we're always short of money. That's why we've come back home, Simon explained casually, as if it was no big deal. I couldn't believe how nonchalant Simon was about this surprising news. The little child, who seemed to be around 3 years old, had long hair, making it hard to tell if it was a boy or a girl. But on closer look, the child resembled Simon when he was young. "From today on, we'll be staying here," Simon announced. "Hello, I'm Rachel. Nice to meet you," the woman said breezily, passing by me and entering the house as if she had always lived there. The little child tried hard to follow her, but she paid no attention and quickly went inside. Seeing this, I couldn't bring myself to turn them away, so I let them stay. As soon as they placed their luggage down, it seemed like they were about to go out. I quickly stopped them and asked for an explanation. After my husband passed away, Simon quickly met Rachel and they started dating. Soon after, they found out she was pregnant. By the time they discovered the pregnancy, it was too late for an abortion, so they decided to have the baby. But things turned out to be more expensive than they expected, and they ran out of money, which led them back here. However, it seemed they still had money for their own pleasures, just not for their child. "What? How can you be so irresponsible?" I exclaimed. "Cola irresponsible? If you want the kid, he's a hassle. He can't even talk yet and, to be honest, just gets in the way," Simon replied. Hearing such heartless words from my own son was shocking, but what shocked me even more was seeing Rachel nod in agreement. "Well, that's how it is. Looking after and loving your grandchild is a grandma's job, right? Please help us out. We're going to grab a drink near the station." "Maxime, be good and stay with Grandma," Simon said. Despite my attempts to stop them, they quickly left, ignoring everything I had to say. The station is about a 15-minute drive from our house, definitely not walking distance. Considering it's a rural area, I wasn't even sure if taxis were available, and even if they were, would Simon and Rachel use one to come back? "Hey, Maxime," I called out tentatively to my grandson. He responded with a bright, adorable smile, a smile that reminded me so much of young Simon. Seeing his smile made me smile back, though it felt like my heart was being squeezed. Such a precious smile, I knew I had to protect him from now on. Seeing Maxime's innocent smile, I made a vow in my heart to do so. During our time living together, Maxime picked up household rules quickly. He was a very bright child. By the time he turned 3, he could speak very well, even better than most children his age. I couldn't help but adore him. As for my eldest son and his wife, they consistently ignored Maxime, treating him like a nuisance. They had no intention of working and contributed nothing to the household expenses. They would go out drinking every day and sometimes wouldn't return for several days. This bizarre situation had become normal for Maxime, and it seemed like he cautiously observed their moves to avoid getting close to them. I couldn't stand it any longer and spoke to Rachel. "Rachel, could you spend a little more time with Maxime? After all, you are his mother." "What? Why are you saying this? I'm busy, you know. You're the one taking care of him, right?" She said without even looking at me, busy with her manicure. Claiming to be busy when she spent her days doing whatever she pleased was quite the statement. Suppressing the urge to yell at her, I thought of Maxime and pleaded once more. Maxime just turned 3. Children that age cling to their mothers when they feel lonely. "Oh please, I never wanted to be a mother in the first place. Maybe it's better if he calls you Mom, isn't it?" "Are you serious?" I asked, stunned. "Oh, come on, of course," she said dismissively. "I'm not. You look so scary right now," Rachel said. She must have seen the anger on my face. In the end, Rachel and I couldn't have a proper conversation about Maxime, and she just left with Simon to go drinking as usual. Maxime didn't seem to mind that his parents left. He continued flipping through his picture book. When he found his favorite fish, he excitedly pointed it out to me and tried to tell me about it with his limited words. Seeing him happy was a relief, but I couldn't stop worrying about how Simon and Rachel planned to take care of him in the future. My worries only grew when I thought about Maxime's future. With my husband's inheritance, I could cover his school fees if needed. I had no choice but to be ready for anything. As I prayed at my husband's altar, I whispered to myself. Glancing at his photo, I felt as if he was encouraging me, and I nodded in response. For 2 years, after deciding to take care of Maxime, I endured living with Simon and Rachel. I watched their reckless behavior. They went out every day, often taking money from my wallet without asking. During this time, I took care of Maxime, and he barely spoke to his parents. Maxime grew up quickly, and just before he was to start elementary school, a tragedy struck. "Hello, are you Maxime's grandmother?" "Maxime has been taken to the hospital. Can you come immediately?" On my way back from picking up adoption paperwork from the city office, I got a call that Maxime was in the hospital. It took 2 years of living together, multiple trips to the city office, and finally, the chance to adopt Maxime was within reach. I thought I could finally separate him from Simon and Rachel, but something terrible had happened. Holding back my emotions, I rushed to the hospital where Maxime had been taken. When I arrived and asked for details, the doctor said Maxime would need to be admitted. Confused, I asked, "Doctor, what's wrong with Maxime? What's the problem?" "I'll explain everything once his parents arrive," the doctor replied, waiting for Simon and Rachel. The nurse approached with a worried look, which made me uneasy. She nodded at me and whispered something to the doctor. "What? The parents don't want to know about their own child's condition." The doctor's loud voice echoed through the hospital, shocked by Simon and Rachel's indifference. I sighed, realizing it was just as I expected. Swallowing my pride, I knew I had to step up for Maxime. I explained our family situation to the doctor. At first, she seemed doubtful, but after seeing the detailed records I kept and realizing that Maxime's biological parents weren't coming, she believed me and explained Maxime's condition. "Ma'am, about Maxime's condition, please stay calm. The test results show cancer in his kidneys." "What? Cancer? This can't be," I said in shock, falling from the chair I was sitting on. The pain from the fall was nothing compared to the shock of hearing that my 5-year-old grandson had cancer. The nurse helped me get up, and the doctor continued speaking. "Fortunately, there's no sign that the cancer has spread. With immediate surgery, we can save his life." "Really? If he undergoes the surgery, he will be saved?" I asked. "Yes, however, we need the parents' consent for the operation. The cancer could progress quickly, so ideally we'd like to operate as soon as possible," after explaining this to the parents. Hearing this, I felt lost. I couldn't imagine Simon and Rachel showing any concern for Maxime. As I thought about what to do, I decided to visit Maxime's room first. There, I saw something I couldn't have imagined. "Hey, I heard you have cancer. The doctor was talking to your grandma in another room. Your life's in danger, and if you keep trying to live, it'll cost us more money. So do us a favor," Simon said, his voice full of disdain. Hearing these heartless words made my rage build inside me. But Maxime, looking at his parents, had a somewhat cold and mature look in his eyes that seemed far beyond his 5 years. His parents seemed taken aback, but soon started laughing again. "Really, you're such an expensive kid," Simon said mockingly. "What are you saying? You two are the ones wasting money." I burst into the room, unable to hold back any longer. Simon looked surprised, but quickly turned to Maxime and continued mocking him. "We don't need such an expensive child like you," he said cruelly to his own son, who was bravely facing his illness. Besides Simon, Rachel was laughing hysterically. Seeing their outrageous behavior, I decided to cut ties with them forever. "If that's how you feel, I, as his grandmother, will adopt him." "Go ahead," Rachel said dismissively. "He won't live long anyway. Just don't ask us for money for the funeral." She laughed loudly. Hearing this, an indescribable rage surged within me. "From now on, we are strangers. Don't ever contact me again. Got it? Goodbye?" The doctor told me about my grandson Maxime's health condition, but I didn't share it with my eldest son and his wife. Instead, I decided to cut ties with them. When they find out the truth, I'm sure they will regret their choices. As I gently hugged Maxime, I had a strong feeling that they would regret what they had done. I told Maxime about his cancer and the upcoming surgery. I reassured him not to worry about the cost and asked him to go through with the operation. "Maxime, I want you to live. I know the surgery might be scary, but you will recover. I'll be right here with you. Grandma, if you're with me, I'm not afraid of anything." "I'll go through the surgery and treatment, I promise," Maxime replied. Seeing Maxime trying to smile and not to worry me, even after hearing such harsh words from his own parents, I hugged him tightly. I also told him about the adoption process I had been preparing. Maxime seemed a bit worried at first, but eventually accepted it. That night, I discussed the adoption with my eldest son and his wife, who were drinking at home. They always said they didn't want a child because of the costs and didn't really care about Maxime. To make them leave my house, I offered them a significant amount of money to stay away from us forever. Without any hesitation, they signed the adoption papers and showed no signs of regret or attachment to Maxime. They looked happy about getting the money and quickly left the house. During the talk, they didn't even glance at or speak a word to Maxime, who was sick. Their lack of responsibility as parents saddened me, but I was relieved that one source of pain for Maxime was now gone. Soon after, Maxime had the surgery, which thankfully was successful. Being young, he recovered quickly and was soon ready to be discharged. "Doctor, thank you so much," I said. "Congratulations on your discharge," the doctor replied. "I'm glad. If you ever feel something's wrong, come see me right away." "Yes, understood," Maxime responded. During his stay at the hospital, Maxime grew close to the doctor and hugged him in gratitude. Once back home, Maxime lay down on his bed and said, "Grandma, thank you so much for letting me have the surgery." "Oh, don't mention it. I'm your parent now, and it's what parents should do. You must be tired today. Get some good rest." "Okay, I'll take a short nap," Maxime said, quickly falling into a deep sleep and snoring lightly. Not long after, I received a call from the hospital. "Oh no, did I leave something at the hospital?" I thought, answering the phone quickly. "Hello, sorry for the sudden call. Actually, someone from a TV station came to the hospital, and they really want to meet Maxime." "A person from a TV station? Why Maxime?" I was completely puzzled, and my mind was filled with questions. After listening carefully, I found out that during Maxime's stay at the hospital, he became friends with a writer who was there for an interview. The writer had shared some of Maxime's stories online, and they were well received by the public. This led to discussions about turning them into a movie. I was utterly surprised. I hadn't known about this since Maxime had talked to the writer outside of my visiting hours. They told me that if it becomes a movie, Maxime wouldn't act in it, and they wouldn't use his real name. But since it's his story, people who know him might recognize it's about him. "I see. Let me think about it. I'd like to discuss it with Maxime too," I said, wanting to think calmly. I decided to hang up the phone for now. Maxime woke up, rubbing his sleepy eyes. When I told him about the call from the hospital, his eyes sparkled with joy. "Really? My story is going to be a movie that everyone watches?" "It seems so. They said they'll hide your real name and make the movie," I explained. "Huh? Why? It's fine, let them use my name," Maxime replied. "But if they use your real name, everyone will know about your illness and our family situation," I said, surprised by his reaction. Facing my surprise, Maxime answered with an innocent smile. "Because I want to tell everyone I have such a wonderful grandma like you." "Oh, Maxime, thank you," I said, tears welling up in my eyes because of his kindness. I never expected to hear such heartwarming words from him. That night's dinner tasted saltier than usual, but I felt deeply happy and fulfilled. The movie preparations went smoothly. While the film didn't use Maxime's real name, he was introduced as the inspiration for the story. The movie became a huge hit after its release, with theaters packed every day. I watched it myself, and even though I already knew the story, it was still a moving experience. I couldn't hold back my tears watching the touching scenes of a loving grandmother and her smart grandson trying to survive together. Later, Maxime was invited to many events to talk about his story on days when he didn't have school. He led a busy life, wanting to support other kids his age who were fighting cancer. Having gone through it himself, he wanted to cheer them on. I did my best to support him. Thanks to the many lectures he gave, Maxime's bank account grew enough for a lifetime. With this money, he could focus on his treatment without worrying about finances if his illness came back. Even if something happened to me, there would be more than enough money for him to attend university without any concerns. Thinking about the future, I carefully stored his bank passbook, knowing it would be essential. One day, after living this way for a while, my eldest son and his wife, whom we hadn't heard from in about 3 years, suddenly showed up at our house. It seemed they had lost a lot of money through gambling and were now in serious debt. As soon as they saw Maxime, they approached him with the same sleazy smiles they always used. "Oh, Maxime, you've grown so much. It's been a while since we last saw you. Don't you miss your mom and dad?" "Exactly, we took care of you when you were a baby. Don't you think you owe us?" Rachel added. Despite abandoning Maxime as soon as they found out about his illness, my eldest son and his wife were still as selfish as ever. Facing them, Maxime gave them a cold look and said, "Who are you?" At his unexpected words, both Simon and Rachel were taken aback, their mouths tightening. Trying not to laugh at their reactions, I stepped between them and Maxime to continue the conversation. "Excuse me, but who might you be? Do you have some business with my son, Maxime?" I asked. "What are you talking about? Maxime is my son. That makes him your grandson," Simon said angrily. But I looked at them with a cold stare. Under my gaze, Simon flinched for a moment, but then he turned to Maxime with a pleading tone. "Listen, Maxime, I messed up. I lost more money than I thought in horse racing. I'm in a really bad situation now. Can you help me out? If I had $30,000, it would be enough. Please." $30,000? That much? I exclaimed, shocked by the unexpected amount. No matter the reason, a debt of $30,000 from gambling was unthinkable. My late husband and I always warned Simon about gambling and going into debt, but it seemed like he didn't listen at all. The money Maxime saved came from the fees he received for giving lectures. He went through a lot to earn that money, sharing his painful memories in front of many people. I told Simon and Rachel, "You two can't use his hard-earned money just for your enjoyment." Then I firmly closed the front door in Simon's face. Outside, my eldest son and his wife started shouting and complaining, making such a loud noise that I had to call the police. Soon after, the noise stopped, and it seemed like they had given up and gone home. However, they didn't give up that easily. The next morning, they started causing a scene in front of our house again. "Mom, please listen. I've changed. I'm turning over a new leaf. I'm sorry for everything. Please let me in," Simon pleaded. "Maxime, I'm so sorry. From now on, I'll be with you and take care of you properly. So please let me in," Rachel added. They kept knocking on the front door early in the morning, annoying the whole neighborhood. Despite their constant noise, Maxime calmly continued his breakfast inside. Eventually, he went to the entrance, but I didn't hear the door unlock. Curious, I quietly checked what was happening. Instead of opening the door, Maxime was watching them from a small window near the entrance. They kept knocking, unaware of his gaze. Maxime then made a proposal. "All right, I'll give you a few questions. If you answer even one correctly, we can live together." "Really? Just like that? Despite everything, you're still a kid at heart, aren't you? What's the question?" "I'll answer anything," Simon replied, sounding relieved and cheerful. After a brief pause, Maxime asked the first question. "First question, tell me my favorite and least favorite foods." Hey Rachel, you should know this, right?" Simon stammered, clearly clueless. Rachel, trying to help, thought for a moment and answered confidently, "Any mother would know that. Your favorites are pudding and chiffon cake, and you hate bell peppers, don't you?" Hearing their answer, it was clear they didn't know Maxime at all. I sighed quietly without them noticing, feeling a mix of sadness and frustration. Maxime looked down at the couple from the window and asked, "Are you sure that's your final answer?" Of course, it's unthinkable for a mother not to know her own son's likes and dislikes, Rachel said confidently from outside. She seemed certain about her answer. Hearing this, Maxime laughed heartily. The couple, not expecting to be laughed at, were probably flustered. After a good laugh, Maxime, now calm, replied to Rachel, "That's wrong. What a shame." "What? Why? You always looked so happy when there were cakes, didn't you? Rachel insisted. That was Dad's favorite, not mine. I used to have an egg allergy, so I don't eat things like pudding or cakes with eggs. I love the egg-free cakes Grandma makes, and I hate whipped cream, but I absolutely love bell peppers. Is that true? Rachel asked, shocked. Before coming to my house, Maxine was only given cheap instant porridges and slices of bread. I often wondered how he managed to stay healthy with such a poor diet. The reason Maxime didn't get sick was largely because of the meals he got at daycare. The principal noticed his diet was lacking and provided allergy-friendly meals, carefully monitoring his health. When she warned Rachel about her poor parenting and threatened to report her to child services, Rachel decided to stop sending Maxine to daycare and moved in with me. Hey, how long do you think we've been apart? How would I know what you like now? Rachel said, frustrated. Then, next question. What is my birthday? Maxime asked. Your birthday? Rachel and Simon looked confused. Maxime's birthday was actually today. Normally, a parent wouldn't forget their child's birthday, especially a mother. But despite this simple question, the couple showed no sign of knowing the answer. Why aren't you answering? It's such an easy question, isn't it? Maxime asked. Of course I know that, right, Simon? Rachel said, turning to Simon. Yes, of course, I know that. Simon replied in a panicked voice, but it was clear they didn't know the answer. If you don't know, you should just admit it, Maxime said. Even after waiting for about 10 minutes, they still didn't answer. Maxime muttered under his breath, and his sad expression showed that he was hurt his own parents didn't remember his birthday. My heart ached for him. No, wait, I just had a brain fart. Of course, I know your birthday. Rachel tried to cover up her mistake. I know it, Rachel said. You just caught me off guard. It slipped my mind. Can you give me a hint? She asked, trying to cover up. In response to their silly excuses, Maxine laughed out loud, but I could see tears forming in his eyes. Feeling bad for Maxime, I quietly moved closer and held his hand. He was surprised to see me, but he nodded, wiped away his tears, and looked straight at his parents. Hey, real parents remember their child's birthday without needing hints. I've never been celebrated by you two, so I expected this, Maxine said. What? After all I did to give birth to you, and this is how you repay me. You should be grateful. Rachel snapped back, starting to get angry. Maxine gave her a cold look, and she went quiet. Well, here's the last question. It's an easy one, Maxine said. I was diagnosed with cancer and treated at a hospital. Which organ was affected? This was a question any parent should easily answer, especially since Maxine's illness had been on TV for several days. But their responses were unexpected. Wasn't it the heart? Simon asked. No, it was the stomach, right? Rachel added. I was so shocked I leaned back and looked up at the ceiling. Despite Maxime's story being a hot topic, my son and his wife showed they had no interest in him at all. Hearing this, Maxime must have thought, I never expected it to be this bad. I felt sorry for him, but to my surprise, he started laughing. Thanks, I get it now. It's worse than I thought, Maxime said. What? Did we miss something? Rachel asked, puzzled by Maxime's reaction. Maxime smiled, but his eyes were not smiling. It was kidney cancer. You claim to be my family, but you know nothing about me. The only one I consider my family is Grandma Camille. Shouldn't you be grateful I gave birth to you? Rachel asked, still angry. That's the point. To me, the only one I can call a parent is Grandma Camille, Maxime said. Oh, looks like my ride is here. Please don't bother coming here again. Maxime left them with those words and closed the window with a bang. Outside, my son and his wife were shouting in anger, but when the police arrived and warned them, they immediately stopped and everything went quiet. I was worried that Maxime might have been hurt by this, but he looked relieved and smiled at me. What I said to them just now, that they are not my parents, is truly how I feel. I've always wanted to call you Mom, but I was too shy to say it. Can I call you that? Of course, Maxime. Thank you, I replied, deeply touched by his words. I hugged Maxime tightly, tears in my eyes. Mom, you're squeezing too hard, he said, but he hugged me back just as tightly. As for those two, they claimed they had lost their son to me, and were saying nonsense like I was being deceived by him. But everything they did to Maxime is documented and recorded, including testimonies from his kindergarten and the parenting diary I kept. The police reviewed the evidence and dismissed their claims. Still, the police contacted us to verify the facts. The officers seemed frustrated with the stubborn claims of my eldest son and his wife. After the call from the police, Maxime went to the police station alone to see them. When he came back, he looked refreshed. I said my final goodbyes to them and told the police everything about the terrible things they've done. They won't have a normal life for a while, I guess, Maxime said. He showed me the evidence he had mentioned. Shockingly, there was footage of the couple committing theft and exchanging money with a stranger. It seemed they believed they could live comfortably off the royalties if they could get Maxime on their side. They even planned to sell him to someone involved in shady dealings in the black market. Seeing their terrible plan, I was in shock and felt chills down my spine. I never thought my own son could be so cruel to his own child. Maxime spoke softly to me, seeing I was dumbfounded. I asked the manager to look into it, and we found out this shocking truth. I thought if you found out, you might be so shocked that you'd faint. That's why I kept it a secret. I'm sorry. It's okay, Maxime. I'd do anything for you and always have your back. It's even scarier to not know about such terrible things. I'm really sorry for hiding it from you all this time. The only one who worries about me this much is you, Mom. That's why I want to protect you too from now on, Maxime said with a slightly embarrassed look. Seeing Maxime's shy expression, tears of joy welled up in my eyes. Even though he has faced many hardships and seems mature for a 9-year-old, that shy expression made him look just like a child, which warmed my heart. My heart warmed as I thought about my eldest son and his wife. They were later found guilty of many other crimes and ended up serving nearly 9 years in prison. They never showed any remorse or apologized. The letters they sent, collected by Maxime's manager, still demand repayment for bringing him into the world. Maxime continues to visit hospitals to encourage sick children. He's now in middle school and has hit puberty, but his kind and honest nature remains the same. He's living a good life. Lately, it seems he has a girlfriend. I see him sneaking out for dates and can't help but think how cute he is. The cancer we worried about shows no signs of coming back, and his recovery is going well. Although it's impossible to say it will never return, regular checkups are essential. For now, he's living just like any other kid his age and seems happy every day. I still fuss over Maxime and nag him a lot. Naturally, there are times when he gets annoyed, but taking care of him gives my life meaning. I hope Maxime can bear with me a little longer. My biggest goal now is to live long enough to see Maxime's wedding as a parent. If I'm being greedy, I'd love to see the face of Maxime's child, my great-grandchild. To make sure I stay healthy until then, I've started going to the gym. Because of this, people around me are often surprised and call me a lively and young grandmother. For Maxime's sake, I'll strive to be a mother he can proudly show off for as long as possible. I'm going to keep pushing forward.